Nice walking.
Hold on.
Yes, indeed. Hello.
John.
Hello.
Okay, I stopped it.
I disagree. I thought that was.
Hello.
I was trying to figure out how to hit the orange on my.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Figure it out.
Let's go for it.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. What we were trying to achieve now is was to play a happy birthday song for SharePoint, but what you heard now was not what we were trying to achieve. So welcome everybody to SharePoint's 20th birthday. Spence.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Depending on where you are joining us from. Hope everybody is well, and thank you very much for joining us on a Saturday, somewhat of a SharePoint tradition in some respects, to celebrate 20 years so far of SharePoint. We don't intend to take things seriously, as you might have figured out by the environment that we're in, and it's really just a celebration and a chance to meet up. Obviously, if we were able to be doing events in person and so forth, there would have been quite a celebration somewhere around the globe, and this we thought would be just a small memento of the product that we all love, and in some cases love to hate.
Well, obviously this is a quite experimental thing we are doing. We are looking now. We have people across 4 or 5 rooms now. So Allspace VR has some limitations, and one of those it has only 50 people in one room. Others are dispersed throughout our others room there. Thanks, we have few people trying to get the thing getting right. Alex Drašković sitting in real life right of me, trying to play that music and to play those videos that we are going to see. And Margit and Elena trying to take care that everybody feels fine in this crazy environment as if it can. And yeah, pretty much welcome to the party here. We're going to try to make the best of it. I want to say only 1 or 2 housekeeping things. You see the QR codes around the place. So if you scan those QR codes with your phones, you are going to take a trivia quiz of 7 questions. The questions were created by Spence. Spence, say something about it.
Yeah, so it's a very technical quiz, and it will really challenge you in terms of your depth of understanding of the product and its history. No, I'm just kidding. It's really just a little bit of fun and an opportunity to win some nice prizes. And we thought we'd put a few sort of jokey questions together to have a bit of fun with a quiz there. So it's certainly not going to be too much of a challenge. Hopefully not, at any rate.
Right. What he didn't say is that those are actually the final exam questions from the MCM, the last rotation.
Well, yeah, some of them were rejects because we felt they would be too difficult for the certification. So we're now, leveraging them the birthday.
Right. But if you take that quiz, few things are going to happen. On this green area right now, we are going to put the tweets with all the answers on the quiz. And people who answer the quiz are going to get some of the valuable and funny prizes. Those are not all valuable. We've got some 2 Collab Summit tickets for for the November this year for European Collaboration Summit, 5 bottles of beautiful European Collaboration Summit official wine, and our famous Community Rock T-shirts. It's all waiting for you. And yeah, and there's an Amazon Echo Dot, but I put it on the end because it's from Amazon. So take the quiz, have fun, and right, take the quiz, have fun. And I'm actually going now to call Spence to come to the stage. Right, I need to start this. We are obviously having still some audio and video challenges. We are going to solve them during the party, so don't take it too hard on us. We are going to be there. Right, that was this was supposed to be there all the time. It wasn't, obviously. Alex, can you switch now to? Yeah, Alex is switching. It takes time. You're going to see the valuable prizes which are coming right now, and then I'm going to ask Spence to give us his vision of SharePoint's the road that we have had until now with our lovely SharePoint. Spence slides.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. I do think we should also mention the for those who don't already know the new dates for the European Collaboration Summit.
Right.
In late November, early December. This is a very unfortunate situation, of course, due to this pandemic with, a variety of different postponements, but also a change in the venue, which we very much hope allows us to accommodate a larger event later this autumn. So you'll see information around the environment that provides links where you can find more information on that event. And we'd obviously love to see as many of you as possible, particularly those of you who are in Europe, to join us. So getting on to the potted history of SharePoint, again, similarly, I don't want to really take things too seriously here. It's obviously just one perspective as well. Most of you will have different perspectives, but if we think about 20 years or 20 odd years in reality in computing terms, in terms of the computing industry, it's a very long time indeed. If we look back to 1998, 1999, this was how it was. The mobile phones were very straightforward devices that didn't really do anything other than calling and texting, although the WAP protocol was a big trend for a couple of years at this time. Most organizations, in terms of their data centers, the idea of low-cost commodity hardware was really starting to win the battle against legacy systems. And you might have had servers running like the one shown in the picture here, a Compact Pro Lion, an extremely expensive Pentium computer, basically. We also had these stinky, horrible 5-inch plastic discs that music came on. And of course, around this time, things like Napster were starting to become commonplace as internet speeds increased. But for most of us, particularly in the home and also in the small business environment, if we had something like an ISDN connection, we felt that we were ahead of the game and we had more access to things. A very different world. And you can see some of the cultural hits. There was a thing called network television in those days, and the major breakout hit that year was The West Wing, and on cable, The Sopranos. Interesting that with a show like that, you would actually be waiting weekly for the new episode. And then if we talk about the sort of more enterprise kind of view of things, these were some of the common tools that were in place, either across a company, but more likely across the department or work group. So we'd have things like Lotus Notes was predominant, as was CC Mail at the time. And then, over a couple of years, intranets became a very high-profile trend using products like Plumtree Portal and so on. From a Microsoft perspective, prior to the the varying SharePoint-related products, Back Office Server, which included Site Server, was really the key offering that allowed Microsoft to really start to take a stranglehold on the enterprise data center, particularly Exchange, of course. And this was an interesting period because it was a gold rush to produce point solutions. Every different type of workload that you would like to do within an organization would usually involve some horrendous procurement process, and you would end up with 15 different tools from 15 different vendors with 15 different support type arrangements, different skills needed to keep everything running and so on. Even something like Active Directory, which came with Windows Server 2000, was a very new thing, and it took a long time for these things to get embedded and to become seen as effectively de facto tools or infrastructure to support these type of applications. So you'd end up with a glorious mess of different systems, all that tried to communicate with each other using different techniques, particularly in respect to things like back-end data and so on. One of the interesting things about the SharePoint's journey is the way that it's mirrored and survived basically all of the key industry trends over the time period. It's also true that SharePoint in some respects has actually led the industry trends. But if we think about the Microsoft products that have lasted over this period, aside from Windows, we're talking about Exchange Server, SQL Server, and SharePoint. Even .NET, which was announced at the PDC this year, is younger than SharePoint, at least in terms of its availability to customers and developers. So as people moved away from client-server systems towards web-based applications, a huge change in the industry at the time. As I mentioned earlier, the rise of low-cost commodity general-purpose computing as opposed to mainframe and larger systems. Another trend was towards distributed application services. So, for example, being able to sign up to your energy supplier using the internet, and that would, or using a website, which would, in some way, shape, or form, integrate with systems from the 70s and 60s that were designed for the energy supply pipeline. We also had to start worrying about scale, redundancy, and performance. Once we have a lot of these general purpose servers in the data center, we need a way to manage them. And at the time, this was all done using, on Windows at least, was all done using graphical user interface tools. So if you can imagine having to be the person that was running, 15 SharePoint farms for a company, all using, the MMC and central administration and things like this, obviously that was not going to be viable in the long term. And other trends more recent in terms of virtualization, first of all, and then really the move towards the cloud with software as a service, but also obviously the hosting infrastructure and some platform services that used to be seen as on-premises point solutions. More important, I believe, than the technology is interesting to technologists, but it's not interesting to real customers of the solutions offered. So it's also true that SharePoint has survived and lasted across numerous usage trends, which really has driven the technology rather than the technology driving usage. It's really the other way around. Again, the switch or the journey from sort of small team, department type solutions to a work group scale and then to the enterprise and wider, of course, now with the cloud is an interesting journey. Business to business was a major trend, the big Gartner geared activity for a couple of years that didn't really work then and now is commonplace. Similarly, e-commerce, particularly around the years 99 to 2002, was seen as a distinct opportunity, but there were very few people able to do it well until much later. Web content management, of course, was a huge trend around the same time period, both in terms of the intranet, but also in terms of small-scale document management systems, most of whom those vendors are really only surviving to support customers that, for whatever reason, couldn't get away from them. So if we now switch gears and just talk briefly about two phases, if you will, of the SharePoint life thus far. Obviously, the early years, there were things before SharePoint that kind of led towards it, and varying degrees of initiatives across the company. And for those of you not familiar with sort of the inside working practices of the company at the time, it's very, very much divisions in isolation, many often working on the same things independently. But around this period, the SharePoint Portal Server product, as it came to be known, and SharePoint Team Services were, came to market and really offered the first integrated suite of tools that could not necessarily master every workload or slice of the pie, as it were, but pointed in the direction. Around this time, Microsoft also acquired Encompass with the product that became Content Management Server. It also acquired a company called ZoomIt, which today is the foundation of identity synchronization across all of Microsoft's strategic platform. Another couple of years and we got to SharePoint 2003 or Portal Server 2003, and a few years later with the next version of SharePoint Team Services. This is really where the product started to get a foothold in the large organizations. It wasn't enterprise-wide at this point. It was really more of a departmental or a divisional solution. And integration was the clear desire from customers. This is an interesting time period because what customers ask for is not necessarily what they really need. So a lot of initiatives around tying different products together were sort of around this time period. But the major activity was, in reality, migration from other products. So I showed Plumtree earlier in the previous slide, but another example would be something like Interwoven. And there was a lot of difficulty in terms of trying to map functionality from other products that weren't, directly the same within SharePoint. And that migration activity, both in terms of portals, but also document management scenarios, really drove the interest from the enterprise with SharePoint's Portal Server 2003. And then if we get into the teenage years, the previous slide was more sort of the baby steps, if you will, and really with the teenage years, SharePoint really came into its own. Certainly it's a widely held view that SharePoint 2007 is the release that really made the product viable across the enterprise, in other words, enterprise-wide. And it was also the birth, if you will, of the SharePoint Online as a service offering, because all of the things and challenges that customers had with running SharePoint 2003 at scale were partly addressed by the improvements that came with SharePoint Server 2007. Things like shared services, things like identity, and some of the functionally wider aspects of the product as well in terms of the workloads that it could support. Business intelligence as one example, business connectivity as another. And so this release really kick-started not just the customer adoption, but also the community in many ways. This was the time period where SharePoint Saturdays were commonplace, the big SharePoint conference events, vast interest. It was the golden age certainly for contract IT staff. You all know the story, right? You get the email from the recruiter. He's asking for 10 years of SharePoint Server 2007 experience when it's only been on the market for a couple of months. And at the same time as this, massively successful, hugely successful on-premises product was coming to market, the initial rollouts of the software as a service solution, SharePoint Online, were also happening. And we move further forward to SharePoint 2010, which really sort of built on top of that success, added a number of vast improvements in terms of being able to run this product at scale and complexity, which fed, of course, directly back into Office 365 as a service offering. Because prior to really SharePoint Server 2010, the only people that were running the product at scale were customers. And there were a few early customers that basically said, look, we don't want to do this, we want to buy this as software as a service. And so the experiences from those customers, allowed the product to be re-engineered to be fit for purpose in the cloud. And then moving forward, perhaps the nadir of the on-premises product of SharePoint Server 2013, which was again another sort of expansion in terms of feature capability with improvements and so forth. And I'm a bit behind, of course, on the schedule here, as always. I tend to waffle. But we have now come basically full circle where the predominant focus is the software as a service offering. So with that, I want to say thanks very much for listening to the boring bit, and we're now going to switch gears and really start the party with a little bit of music, and hopefully you will enjoy our house band this afternoon here at the SharePoint 20th birthday party. Thank you very much.
Guys, thank you, Spence, a lot. All of you who have been joining us at European Collaboration Summit parties in the past year, you know our friend and great musician Lana. She is from Zagreb, from Croatia. She was the part. She was really our house band, as Spence has already told. And I explained her what are we going to do. She was like, so you are telling me this is a birthday party for a software product? I was like, yes, this is what we are doing here. She was like, okay, I'm going to start the song, which is an I love you just as you are. So, Lana, to work.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this great birthday party. Can you imagine? SharePoint is 20,
yeah,
but it doesn't
technology.
Look or feel a day over 18 or 19. In a year, it's going to be of drinking age, Collaboration Summit boat cruises, and I'm also prone to believe it. In fact, I know it because you guys were awesome. Unfortunately, we are not celebrating this birthday on a boat cruise this year, but in virtual reality. My band and I hope to see you all in November for the next edition of European Collaboration Summit in person again. And now it's time to play some music for you. You're going to meet some great musicians the way you are. Thank you, and let's party.
Okay, everyone. This does not work. Thank you very much, Outspace VR. So, Spence, this is time when we start to improvise.
I'm not going to sing.
Fitz can sing.
Right, Fitz can sing. I have an idea that Fitz could be singing right now. No.
The speaker needs to be on.
Right. So we are going to look in background what's up with the band from Outspace VR. Before we do that, Jeff still around, and can Jeff take over right now? Just
Yeah, we could switch it around and have Jeff and then
exactly.
put Rana on after. Yeah.
Right. If Jeff is still around, if he didn't take a break.
I just am getting word from Jeff that his computer crashed, so he'll be coming back in shortly. So we're stalling for 5 minutes here.
So yeah, this is what happens. We are going to see.
I wanted to say one thing that I think might help everybody on Spencer's trivia questions. And this is not just one question, this is for every question. As you know, historically, to any question, the answer is always SharePoint. So to the winner, just say SharePoint. Right, Spence?
Absolutely. Whatever the nail, the answer is SharePoint.
Certainly the consultant view, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't. We thought about maybe having it depends as one of the choices for each question, but you know, that would be unfairly biased towards consultants, right? So
I was going to say, what is the, if that's the consultant answer, what is the common answer for all of your questions for developers?
That's good feedback.
It worked on my machine.
Sorry, Mark, is that answer now works in my tenant?
Absolutely. What used to be works in my site collection works in my tenant. What will it be in the future?
Works in my brain implant.
Works in my Azure Stack instance.
Go to the keynote up there.
Works in my AI.
Works in my data center.
How about walkabout?
So,
as the normal parties then. Okay, pretty good. Well done, guys.
Well, looks like Jeff is a couple minutes away still, booting into AltSpace.
Mark, while Jeff's joining us, why don't you've been around this game as longer than a lot of us, why don't you give us some of your early recollections of SharePoint in its infancy? Yeah, I'll at least give you one take. When I first took the job, I was the first SharePoint Online product manager, and I was given some keys by a guy named Arpan Shah. And my one little funny internal trivia was, you know, at the time it was called BPOS, but it really was at the day a server being hosted by Microsoft. And the trick was, how do we convey what SharePoint isn't compared to what SharePoint on premises is? And just after a couple of years, the team, you know, did some amazing work to move to multi-tenancy. And the real value now, sometimes I know headache for IT, but the real value is the value is in the cloud and then moves back to on-premises. And that switch I saw about 2013. But when I first came on board and seen what the team was doing, it really was doing massive upgrades for the world. And for anybody that's done any form of SharePoint upgrade, you know, that came with its own hiccups and headaches. But now for the agility of the product in the cloud, it really is, you know, just minor tweaks. You almost barely know that things are being upgraded. But if you remember in the back of the day, there was some downtime. All right, Jeff is now entering the party. So we should see him here soon. I can see his bubbles bouncing. Here he comes.
I think historically, though, anytime demos have gone wrong, that person gets promoted.
There's the infamous Chris Caposello blue screens. Who are you? Right. Am I where I'm supposed to be?
Yes.
You are. We could see you.
Yes.
So I think I'm going to say a few words, and then we're going to play a video, and then give my perspective, and then we'll. So before we start, I just wanted to say, ouch. If you told me 20 years ago, and I was slightly buzzed at a ship party, that I'd be in the middle of a global pandemic in virtual reality on a Saturday morning, and in all weird hours of the day around the world, people would be joining us to celebrate the birthday of a software product, not have taken that bet. So this continues in the tradition of there's things that are unique and magical and wonderful and unpredictable on SharePoint in this community. And thank you, Sir Abbas, everybody who's done this event or SharePoint Saturdays or whatever, collab events or whatever it is around the world where you've made lifelong friends, you've evangelized organizations how to work better, you've given us feedback, good, bad, and ugly. I know there were some things we did pretty well. We wouldn't still be here otherwise, but there were also some things we just made goofball mistakes. I hope you can, maturity 20 years, I know I think I can look back at it all and say, there's a few things we wish we'd done differently. And we're super grateful that everybody was our both biggest and some days our toughest critics. That's what we needed to make product and community as strong as it can be. So I just feel really blessed. One thing that's fun for me is said in the last week or two, pointing out to people SharePoint's growing faster than ever. We will hire probably 250, 300 new engineers to work in the SharePoint team around the world this year, which you probably don't know. So it means there's all these people coming from other companies, but a lot from colleges who may not have heard of SharePoint. And there's this moment where they all, these 23, 24, 25-year-olds say, what is this? Oh my gosh, they're nuts over this product. And so, thank you. If there's one word I have today, it's gratitude. This has been a huge part of my life in ways I could never predicted. So thankful, obviously, for the team that I got to work with at Microsoft. Very thankful for all the customers and partners. So feel very fortunate there. And so we're going to talk a little bit more. I think, Mark, I think next step is for me to introduce the video that'll play in a few minutes, or 20 seconds or so.
Yeah, I want to check with Addis. They were having just a couple of issues running the videos, but Addis, where are we now?
So Mark, we are going to give it another try with the video, and we are working on the alternative solution for video. So let's Alex is playing this video as we say as now. Should be there in 25 seconds. If it doesn't come, we are going to make another try.
Okay, so this is a brand new video we just launched a few minutes ago. Nobody's seen it before. Asked our design team to make a fun reel of all the work they've done powering experiences across Microsoft 365 with SharePoint. A lot of folks like, hey, SharePoint's the back end of Microsoft 365. UX team is bigger than ever. Go ahead and bonus extra. Obviously, that's something we want to blow up on Twitter and every place else to let people know that SharePoint's innovating faster than ever. Much, much better UI than the SharePoint V1 versus Plumtree days that they're so eloquently talked about. So, all right, here's where I've got to be 2 minutes a slide to get the synchronization right. So Spencer did a great job. I'll give my perspective, maybe a little bit inside. So the picture here is the slide that we showed Bill Gates in our first big SharePoint review. Spencer referred to us working on site server. We blew up Spike site server. Some of the GMs like Terry Meyerson and Satya Nadella worked out okay. For me, I had to do a little bit longer work to be successful. This single slide we showed Bill, and I love that the 3 circles there are the 3 circles in the SharePoint logo today, and they correspond really to the OneDrive and Files experience, Team Collab and Teams experience, and the Portals and Viva experience we have today. So a unique thing, we brought these workloads together. It was called Tahoe for a while. There was as Spencer talked about, we were incubating a bunch of different things. I hired the branding firm that gave us the name SharePoint, and we slapped it on 2 different things and decided to do that and then bring them together in V2, which was really a big rewrite on this brand new ASP.NET. And then it became a rocket ship. In 2007, integrated CMS. We did the document lifecycle work. I sometimes joke we got to $500 million before we added item level security. We use the phrase minimal viable product in the tech industry now, MVP. And for us, it was an MVP to not have item level security for our first couple releases. But anyway, server begat TKM and Tahoe and SharePoint, and people embraced it. And it was so wonderful that we were able to get fans of it very early on, and people gave us lots of feedback, and that led really to the next era for us, which was the best community in tech. Spencer talked about 2007 as the inflection point for us. That's really where we had depth in collaboration and document management and publishing and portals at a reasonably mature platform. So we got Bill to announced that SharePoint became a $1 billion business and that we were going to offer Microsoft online services for everyone at the SharePoint conference. And many of you just go to these conferences, and it was just, yes, the sessions and the news were great, but the best part was like the hallway, the after parties, and just chatting with people and making friends. I mean, I hope we made organizations more productive and helped them collaborate together, and still do. The fact that we were able to bring a number of you together and make friendships in that period is just awesome and humbling. And again, we feel very grateful. The SharePoint conferences and SharePoint Saturdays grew and grew. There was like records. There were people who flew around the world to go to 2 or 3 SharePoint Saturdays in a day. Had a couple get married at a SharePoint conference. We had, Huey Lewis and Bon Jovi. I think our peak conference was over 12,000 people before we brought everything together in the Ignite Mega Conference. And so that was just really fun era where people were making their careers and in some cases lives around SharePoint. I remember Alistair and Tracy a couple of years later sending around pictures they were doing driving around South Africa in a bus, evangelizing people in that country on SharePoint. And it's just like, really wonderful. But that was sort of, every great story has three parts to it. And that was sort of the verge of the challenging story for us, which was the transition to the cloud. Some of you read the book Innovator's Dilemma, which Clayton Christian says, don't listen too carefully to your customers. In our case, our customers told us no one will ever go to the cloud. But we knew it made sense just because it was way more efficient. We could get software out every day as opposed to every 3 years. So Steve Ballmer did one of the most important things in the history of Microsoft. He gave a speech at University of Washington we're all in. We ran this ad that you see in the picture here, SharePoint right in the center of it, and didn't really fully anticipate what we would be doing as we went from a hosted model where each server, each organization got its own farm to a multi-tenant model. We slogged at it, and it's funny to see InfoPath on the stage. I'll tell one quick story there. The GPM at that time, a guy named John Kaufman, walked in my office and said, this cloud thing is going to be really, really hard. You're going to need to take every engineer you can find that's really good and experienced and put them on it. I took the InfoPath team, and most of them went to work on the provisioning system of SharePoint. When COVID hit, and I think our peak day post-COVID, 3 million new users of SharePoint in a day. Would have never been able to do that a few years later without that work at that time. It was certainly well ahead of customers and partners. I remember going to an MVP event before the Exchange conference in 2014, and I was skewered for being so far ahead of customers. But I said, be patient, it's gonna play out, it's gonna play out. So a lot of sweat and tears from the teams then, a lot of faith from the community that this cloud thing would happen, and then started to take off. There was a lot of competition. I won't name them all, but there's a lot of other really good tech companies, and they were born in the cloud. When Satya became CEO, I spent his first year is running corporate strategy. A lot of web development off to the side, and working with things like React and so forth. I said, we were talking about what I'd do next after that year. So he asked me to come back to SharePoint. And we had this really pivotal MVP summit in 2015 where I told the MVPs, trust me, I'm not seeing anything yet in SharePoint. So we rewrote with a much bigger design team. I think I doubled or quadrupled the size of the design team. We wrote the SharePoint UI off of ASP.NET onto React and JavaScript on the client. And I think told a really clean story. OneDrive, we brought that in. Omar Shaheen, Steve Bailey, Jason Moore, a bunch of people from the OneDrive team. I learned so much from them, helped us make this all really successful. And then I love how the community embraced it. There was a little bit of, oh, not another app model from the SharePoint team, which, hey, it's been 5 years, I haven't changed it yet, so pretty good. But Ben Yellen, one of our MVPs, did the little cool bus in yellow, which was just awesome. It was this reinvention for us of how OneDrive relates to SharePoint. Every group in my Office 365 would get a team. We were heavy under development at that time in this thing called Team Spaces or Skype Spaces that you now know as Microsoft Teams. We didn't announce it yet at the time. And redoing portals democratized as comm sites, and now, of course, rolling up to Viva Connections. And so I really love how the community embraced this renewal and reboot of SharePoint. And so last few years, both because of that work and all of your support, and Teams launched in 2017, and sadly, COVID hitting and accelerating for a lot of companies their shift to cloud collaboration. We were faster than ever. I think everybody knows this stat. In 2020, we added over 100 million monthly active users to SharePoint. Users in 1 year, and we had added to our online services in the previous 11 years combined since Bill Gates announced it at the SharePoint conference in 2008. We were adding, again, sort of 2-3 million new users a day, multiple petabytes a day this month. I won't go into the exact number, but every day there's multiple petabytes uploaded to the SharePoint service, millions of requests per second. So all that sort of blood, sweat, and tears that our team went through, all of you supported us, has paid off. And now we're supporting all these scenarios. And I love this meme. I think somebody posted it as a little bit of a jab at us, sort of astronaut meme of, wait, it's SharePoint, all SharePoint it's always been. But we sort of, whether it was a jab or love, we fully embraced it. And now SharePoint's obviously powering a lot of new things. Drive, Teams, Stream is being redone on SharePoint. We announced the new Viva apps. we showed Microsoft List that we loved so much. A couple years ago, I increased the size of the team. We decided, let's break it out of SharePoint. Of course, you should get lists in SharePoint sites, but let's make them amazing standalone and inside teams. I hope you take away the SharePoint team's bigger than ever, growing faster than ever, innovating in user experience, and we will still make some mistakes. We recently had pick up on some of the tooling in the SharePoint framework. We apologize, we will do better. So thank you all for celebrating the work when we deserve it, but also poking us when we don't. Let me next roll this video of something I did to celebrate the birthday of SharePoint.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
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 So,
all right. So let me just close and say thank you, and I'm very happy to get off the stage, listen and learn from everybody else's reflections. Thank you so much for everything everybody's done here for SharePoint, and you will do in the future. Today is not just a day to look back, but a day to look forward.
I want to put a small note just before Addis, you say anything. For everything that Jeff showed, if you want to see it in its full glory, we'll be tweeting it out. It's in a blog. If you see my Twitter feed, you'll see him immediately. But Jeff did a wonderful job with that video where he played all the instruments. So definitely see it in all its glory.
I just wanted to say the same. I have obviously heard the video before. Jeff was actually great in this video, and the platform doesn't do him right. So huge applause for Jeff, and huge thanks for everything that Jeff is doing for the SharePoint, for the community, and for everything. And Jeff, thank you for being with us.
Thank you all. Excited to stay here till the bitter end. I wish there was a virtual SharePoint.
Yep. That's what we all wish. Mark, when you were already talking, come on the stage, please.
I was taking a picture of all the audience clapping.
So the thing is, we obviously have issues with music and playing audio videos. So we are going to show the concert a bit later when we try to solve the issues. But we are just thinking, let's go on with the stories. And as much as I can see, Mark Cashman stands first on my list for telling the stories.
I appreciate it, and a hard act to follow, especially not just that Jeff is Jeff, but Jeff putting a little blood, sweat, and tears into all his instruments. It's also just awesome to look out. I know it's a little weird with no arms and no legs, but it's a wonderful virtual reality space to show the support of the community. So thank you for all everything that everybody's done over these last 20, 10, 5, however many years you've been with SharePoint. When Addis and Spence asked us, to think about something we'd want to share, and I'm really interested to hear what everybody else has to say. The first thing that came to mind was one of the more scary things that I heard probably about 10 years ago. I'm terrible with history time unless I'm writing it down. But I went into a meeting and I honestly had no idea the context of the meeting, even by agenda. Everybody that was there was very senior compared to me. And the way that the meeting started, I won't name any names, but the statement was, for SharePoint, all trust code is dead. And I didn't know what that meant to the extent of now I know what it means, and certainly the impact and the amount of change that it dictated. But to see the realities of where the needle was moving, where the hockey puck was going, whatever analogy, and to know that it just needed to be a more secure, safe environment for people to develop and build things on to use, it really articulated everything that was going to be this gargantuan move to the cloud. There was so much change. There were so many things that were missing in the early days. There was a lot of change for everybody that has been used to working on premises. And just staring down that notion of this is a significant change. I'm not a developer, but that just felt pretty huge. And to see where both the product went, where the community went, where our customers went, and that huge level of trust, which is really the heart of what I had hoped to convey, was it was the right move. It was a tough move, but the move to the cloud, the move away from full trust code, however you look at it, small features and big that came and went, or are now so substantial in the cloud and at scale, it's pretty amazing. I've been really honored throughout the years to be a part of the community and to be a part of the team and to talk with customers, work with partners, hear the pains, hear the successes, and just to have started that. For me, it started in the cloud. I really was hired to be the product manager for SharePoint Online, but to see working with people who are hardcore on premises, hardcore developers, hardcore IT, and then with me getting my experience over the years to fit where I fit, I really enjoyed finding a space in the community, and just looking out here and thinking back on the years, really pleased and proud to have been a nugget of a part of the SharePoint community history.
Was it all? Thank you, Mark. This was the first to be a joke. Thanks out, Spence. Who do we have next?
Next up, we have Tracy.
I think our South African friend here, just beside me.
Oh,
hey, Trace.
There she is.
Hello, hello. You just run up onto stage and burn 0 kilojoules. Woohoo! Just kind of get myself in there. How's it, everyone? So, without introductions, of course, I'm pretty much Tracy, crazy pants wearing cupcake. But SharePoint absolutely changed my life, like absolutely. And with no formal education, I lived an incredibly colorful life up to being introduced to SharePoint. I was a bookkeeper who then opened a driving school, and I gave driving lessons, believe it or not. From there, I had an art shop. I gave art lessons. I eventually opened a decor shop where I designed furniture and kitchens as well as building them. Now, you might be wondering whether any of these skills fits into or supports my career as it is today, and I can promise you that it does. For me, it's natural to apply problem solving and look for ways to do things different and better. And add to that the superpower of empathy and patience to help, support and train people, and you end up with this crazy pants wearing geek who loves people and technology equally, who, yes, even has a SharePoint tattoo, because everyone needs a SharePoint tattoo, right? So fast forward that a couple of years, and I'm a systems administrator at a manufacturing company. One morning, my boss calls me in, telling me I was promoted to intranet manager. Imagine that. And that apparently the intranet was built on SharePoint. So not even caring about the promotion, my exact words were, what on earth is SharePoint? Okay, I wasn't even thinking about money or nothing. I was like, what on earth is SharePoint? And I had a long weekend to learn enough to not cause chaos. And that next week, I had to start supporting the platform as well as handle further optimizations. I made a decision to never tell employees that I didn't know, and rather said, I'm just on another call, or I'll get back to you in a couple of minutes. And of course, then did some frantic research to solve the problem. Although it's never a bad thing to admit when you don't know something, hearing myself say it 1,000 times a day was detrimental to my mental well-being. And I had to continuously convince myself that I could do this and I would get better at it. Eventually, when I gained enough confidence and experience, I was no longer afraid to say that I don't know. As not a developer,
The next 5 years taught me loads about solutions that can be built out of the box without adding customizations. And of course, InfoPath was part of this mix, on which I can cheerfully blame some of my new gray hairs and many bottles of wine consumed under duress. My introduction to SharePoint was 14 years ago, nearly to the day. 9 years ago, I lost my corporate empathy and registered my current business. And through curiosity, perseverance, hard work, and loads of learning, SharePoint has opened doors for me in my career and eventually introduced me to the best and most incredible community in the world, which is you people standing in front of me and those joining us from afar. And of course, SharePoint also became a gateway drug that eventually led me to Microsoft 365. Now, let us not forget, even when you don't see it, SharePoint is still the heartbeat in the background, people. Even if you only use OneDrive and Microsoft Teams, the magic dust that brings many of the features together can be attributed to SharePoint. So I think from me and all of us, put your hands together. Happy birthday, SharePoint. And thank you for being the best friend anyone can ever ask for. And yes, we've had our days when we got mad and we didn't speak to each other for a couple of days. But we got through it and not only survived, but excelled. So thank you very much. And to people like Jeff Teper, Mark Cashman, Dan Holm, inspirations to me and personal mentors and role models, thank you very, very much to you to also be part of this community. Thank you. Can a person jump off the stage? Can that be done? Yeah.
Do it. Do it.
Anyone can, you can.
Is someone gonna like catch me? It's try the split. Who was saying something? Addis, you were gonna say something?
No, I'm just thinking that if anybody really can jump from the stage, it's you.
Okay, let's do this.
Right.
1, 2,
look, it's really
3.
Go,
it's
go,
really
go,
easy.
go,
Look,
go.
look, look.
Woo!
Oh,
Well
Got
done.
it.
It really
Thanks,
is easy.
guys.
Spence, who do we have next?
Okay, next up, if he's here, John White. There he is.
All right.
Very accurate avatar, I must say. Looks just like John.
Well, I'm a little bigger than this. You can hear me okay, I assume?
Yep, go for it.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
We can hear,
Excellent.
and we can see you, Melbourne, my friend.
All right. Well, I have a lot of stories about SharePoint, but apparently I can't tell most of them. So the one I do want to tell has to do with community. And there was one particular event. I mean, I've been in SharePoint space in some ways since 2001, but very, very seriously since the mid-2000s, I suppose, and became an MVP in 2010. And it was only at that point in time that I really started doing any speaking, and I worked my way up to it. I have an aversion to public speaking, believe it or not. But I basically got over that, and apparently I had something to say because I started to be invited to various events. And around 2015, our host for this event kindly invited me to the first SharePoint Conference Adriatics, which of course became the European Collaboration Summit eventually. And it was in Zagreb. And I was quite excited to be there. I had recently met my now wife. We had just gotten married that year, who was from Belgrade, just down the road, really. But, you know, part of that same culture. So I was being fully immersed in it. And I'll tell you, it still is the most hospitable conference I've ever been to, particularly so back then. The story I'm relating took place on the third speakers dinner, I believe. It was there were 3 nights. You know, of course, had a huge speakers dinner every night, and we were at a restaurant in downtown Zagreb called Prizvancu. And we were having a wonderful time. We did not want the evening to end. Unfortunately, the restaurant did want the evening to end. So what happened was, I don't know who did it, but someone acquired 3 bottles of Medica, which is a honey brandy. It's not as strong as some of the brandies you'll find there, but it's strong enough. And we wound up standing outside the restaurant in the street, handing the bottles from person to person. This was pre-pandemic, of course. It was wonderful. Everybody gathers into groups. We're talking about various things, and we realize I start talking to various people about where they're from. I'm Canadian, so I'm in Europe. I'm excited, and I'm talking to various people about where they're from. And Oz is obviously from Bosnia originally. Lives in Germany now, but we're talking to some of the other folks there. Alexandra, I think that's where I met Alexander. That particular night, and he was also Bosnian. He was Bosnian Serbian. My wife's Serbian. There was a couple of Croatian folks. There was some Serbian folks there, and we're talking. And they just I can't remember who it was, but one of them just says, "Yeah, and 20 years ago we were shooting at each other." And that's always stuck with me, how poignant that is. And I don't know that it's certainly because of the SharePoint community that an event like that or a moment like that got to happen. But it's always had a real impact that I thought to myself, wow, I get to experience this. So this community that SharePoint has engendered has really given me, and it's given many people, a lot of opportunities. And I really want to thank all of the members of the community, everybody who promotes the community. It's really community rock, man. That's it.
Yeah, I just have one thing to add to that. That person who got us that rakia, John, that was
Yes.
later trying to get rid of us.
That's perfect. No, I don't blame them.
Yep.
All right, I'll clear out.
Okay, the last, but definitely not the least in this batch, is one person who I still didn't see today, but I have been told he's here. Where's Dan?
Yeah, he should be here somewhere.
I think I'm here on the other side of the stage right across from you, Otis.
Oh, there we go. There's Dan.
There.
All right.
I'm going to try to do high five with this thing because I cannot hug you in person, which I would like to do, but this is high five from my side.
Well, I can high five you right back there, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, one and only, Dan Holm.
All right, let me face the right direction here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I think I've seen most of the people in the room, a lot of friends, but for those who don't know me, I'm Dan Holm. I am actually virtually joining you from Hawaii, so I put on an appropriate SharePoint teal Hawaiian shirt to celebrate the birthday of this product and to celebrate the incredible power of this community. I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts as part of this birthday celebration. First, a personal story. Many of you will have heard this, so I'll keep it short, but my introduction to SharePoint happened in February of 2006. I was working as a Microsoft consultant focused primarily on Windows at the Winter Olympics in Torino. And we had a really significant set of engineering challenges that we needed to address with the Italian telecommunications provider. And my boss came to me and said, Dan, we've got to build an application to solve this problem and track issues overnight. And I said, I am not a developer, and many of you know that. But I'd heard about this thing called SharePoint, and people had said, wow, you could install it quickly and create lists and your libraries and share documents. And so I literally overnight built a SharePoint server, stood up a library for engineering, created a list, an issue tracking list, and we were actually in the middle of solving problems by the next day. And it was that experience that convinced me that this platform, this application really had an amazing ability to let normal people solve problems. And I think that's what is, to me, the superpower of SharePoint for the last 20 years. Everyone in this room has had experiences solving problems for ourselves, for other people, and SharePoint lets us do that. And better than that, for whatever the magic sauce reason was, we all came together to start solving these problems. And this community that started early in SharePoint's history and just blossomed during the server age and then exploded during the cloud age, this community has done so much to help each other grow their careers, in many cases enter our careers, solve problems. This is the most generous group of people and that I know of in technology, and it's been a pleasure to be part of the journey with you all. I think the people are one of the main things that make this community valuable. And the second thing I would say is our passion. People here have so many diverse passions, both for technology and for what they do in their lives. It's also been a pleasure for me over the past years to watch people bring their interests and their personal cares to this community, and again, share those, embrace them. This community to me also represents one of the most diverse and inclusive communities in technology. I've never seen someone join this community who hasn't been welcomed and embraced, which is just amazing. And finally, the third aspect of the community I wanted to talk to was its promise. This community, first of all, helps us at Microsoft deliver our promise to our customers. And at you and the hard work you do, many long days and long nights are helping Microsoft achieve our goals. And when I came into Microsoft 5 years ago next week, I was hired partly because I had the experience and the perspective of all of you, that I had the combined knowledge and the channel through you to understand what our customers needed when we relaunched SharePoint. If I could tell you how many conversations I had at Microsoft that started off, how can we leverage the SharePoint community for the benefit of Microsoft 365? I had so many of those conversations for the past 5 years. And I think my answer was always, you don't have to do anything. It's already happening. This community has evolved so incredibly, from very deep technical conferences and communities around the technology to a community that now includes developers, IT pros, business people. And it's been amazing to watch this community embrace new elements of what Microsoft is building, Power Platform, Microsoft Teams, now Viva, it goes on and on. If you're someone who is new into this room today, you're going to find the most amazing people with the deepest passion. And the one thing I think is safe to promise is that this community and these products will take you places that you've never been before, and it will be an exciting career. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to meet in person soon and celebrate those that passion, those people, and that promise later on this year. But it's been a pleasure to join you here today. And thank you, Otis and Spence and the entire team for putting together my first virtual event. This has been a real joy, and I hope everyone has a great time here today. Aloha, everybody.
Thank you, Dan. So
Thanks,
I'm
Dan.
going to be brave now and try to put the Lana's first part of Lana's concert for us. Again, we are going to give it a try. If video gods are with us, we are going to see it. If not, then we are just going to keep talking without music, and we are going to publish then the concert later on our website. But let's give it another try, because just it's a try. So let's see if this is going to work now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this great birthday party. Can you imagine? SharePoint is 20, but it doesn't look or feel a day over 18 or 19. In a year, it's going to be of drinking age, but I don't think anyone ever really paid too much attention to such ridiculous constraints. What characterizes...
Okay, no, so it's not going to work. At least now we know the limits of the Altspace VR as a platform. And for the next Spence, I would like to introduce our first panel.
But it doesn't look or feel a day over 18.
Okie doke, yeah. So for the panel, if the first panel is going to be the future of SharePoint. So if we could invite on stage, please, Mark, Eric, Tracy, and Mike.
Is its great community.
Just making their way to the stage. Thank you very much. Great. Okay, so this is also quite a challenge to do in this type of environment. So we have actually sort of pre-canned the questions, but I don't know what any of these four lovely people are going to respond with. So thanks for joining us, folks. We've got 4 topics that we'd like to hear your thoughts on, and the first one is around what actually both Jeff covered and I touched on very briefly in terms of SharePoint has basically become the de facto foundation now for various collaboration-related services from Microsoft. So what do you think are the major opportunities this offers us going forward? Let's start the first question, please, with Mike.
Well, thanks. Normalizing and consolidation, I think. Look, there are SharePoint lists, there are Microsoft lists. There are SharePoint sites, there's OneDrive. I think that the major opportunity is to get it down to one infrastructure that gets repurposed over and over again in many, many ways. This is already happening. I just want the team to finish the job. Don't force developers to do constant context switching because 2 things that are very, very similar and based on the same kernel technology still express themselves differently in terms of user interfaces and APIs. Get it down to one common set of services that we can repackage and reuse over and over again. Viva is a good example of this. Lists is a good example of this, but finish the job.
Great, thank you. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I've always felt as the platform improves, the opportunity improves, and it's both a push and pull. So as the platform gets additional capabilities, or as always happens with SharePoint, gets a lot of feedback on the direction that it needs to go, that the opportunity. Let's see, is that better audio?
Yeah.
It was just thinking that the opportunity really pushes out towards a better user experience. So there's an opportunity for end users with platform as it matures. There's also that big opportunity for IT to do more of what they can do. And I think what it boils down to is just that level of control. You may have felt if you started in the cloud a long time ago that that platform was a bit of a closed box. But as it matures, the intent based on just the overwhelming feedback, positive and negative, is to move that towards being a place where you can get the benefits of just using it as it is, if that's all you need. But as you require more, there are fewer roadblocks for end users to be able to do lightweight configuration customization. There's a lot of opportunity, obviously, for IT to open up and lock down things to make sure that their security policies and classifications are all applied. But also that need to treat the platform as an open location means I think that there are better opportunities for everybody.
Okay, Tracy, any thoughts?
Okay, so if we're talking about opportunities, I would first like to take the opportunity to say sorry to the 3 people I walked through when I came up on stage. That's just crazy. I'm so sorry. Okay, so I know that digital transformation has become a very watered down word. Okay? But that said, the time truly has arrived for companies to digitally transform. And using these tools that we have already in Microsoft 365, including, of course, SharePoint. And the integration between these apps and services, as well as the ability for citizen developers now have to optimize and automate, will allow the businesses to transform. Now, the last project I ever was involved with on a SharePoint on-premises was like 12 years ago, okay? And the cost for hardware and services were astronomical. And I was convinced that I would never, ever be able to afford SharePoint in my own business. I would have to rob a bank, okay? And of course, pretty soon after that, Office 365 was launched. And there I was winning at life. I could afford now to have SharePoint plus all these other great apps and services for less than the cost of a good bottle of wine. How amazing is that? So for me, this is by far the greatest benefit is also for small companies, to have these opportunities and allow them to tap into the opportunities to continue to, I think, transform.
and that I'm excited about.
Marvelous. And lastly, Eric?
I think the key part of your question there is, or this topic is SharePoint as a foundation for other services. That going forward, anything that is a cool new feature that shows up in one of the other services backed by SharePoint means it's a cool feature that's going to get exposed somehow in SharePoint, which continues to add to the value of the platform, not only as we use it today, but going forward in the future. It's no simple matter for enterprises to consider moving from their on-premise deployments or even another cloud solution over into 365. There's a lot of consideration that has to be given, and those ships don't turn very fast. Sometimes they get blocked in the canal, right? But the more the features, how many projects that we have that look like that, right? The more that the features expand on the platform as a whole, the easier I think it is for the enterprise to justify ongoing investment in that area and to continue to their migration path to the cloud in a manner that suggests that they're on the right path. It's hard to make those calls as a CTO or a CIO on future direction, 3+ years from now. But with Microsoft continuing to invest in SharePoint as the back end and foundation, as Spence stated, of these services, I think it's a much clearer decision for them to make to say, yes, let's continue going this path and moving into this cloud environment because we trust Microsoft will continue to deliver.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, so for the second question, this time let's start with Tracy. What do you think the main challenges to further adoption of solutions based on SharePoint will be over, say, the next 2 or 3 years?
I'm not surprised at all why Spence got me to answer this first, okay? Because the fact that I don't have a resistance plus fall tattoo is quite amazing. I mean, I get myself up in a situation about the adoption thing. But so although technology has become so much more advanced and complex, okay, companies are training people less. I don't know what's up with that. So assuming that it should be intuitive, which of course it's not. And we can't blame the technology for it, though. The vast majority of users have never been trained to use technology correctly. I mean, before SharePoint even. I mean, this is not a SharePoint problem. And they'll continue to use the old flawed ways of working in new ways of working platforms, which I think is a challenge. So this is not just applicable to end users. And I'm going to step on some toes now, but of course I'm famous for that. As development opportunities grow, I am concerned about solutions being custom built, which could have been delivered out of the box. And this is due to the fact that quite often developers do not know the base product well enough and mostly rely on their expertise around it or outside of it. I mean, it's all good to be an expert at handling a hammer and using nails, right? But it could be disastrous if you don't understand how the wooden plank responds to being beaten. So I just really, really want to encourage companies, I think, because you have to invest in training, especially now with citizen developers. I mean, there's people building incredible apps out there who doesn't understand the base platform. So I think that's my biggest challenge I see coming up, Spence.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, certainly, as you said, you could apply the same comments to Microsoft Word or any other application, right, for the large number of people that don't have a technology background. What about you, Eric?
Well, I think the biggest barriers to adoption going forward are the customers themselves, as it has always been. Poor process, poor culture.
Hey, Eric, we can't hear you at the moment. Oh, there we go.
Looks like it muted me. I'm back. So we have to be careful that we don't, in the cloud, diverge too far from customer workloads. There are things that are really cool like SharePoint Spaces, but those are so far from customer workloads now that it's difficult to bridge that gap with vision. So we have to take it in small steps, which is incumbent not just on us as consultants, promoters of the platform, but also on the vendors and the customers themselves. We have to also, there's a lot of competing services, right? Mike mentioned it. You have 2 types of lists, and there's different types of surveys, and then there's forms and Power Apps, and there's a lot of noise. charting a path through that is challenging. We can do a better job, I think, of giving a vision and a pathway to customers for that. And then finally, with all of those pieces and parts, it's hard to come up with a building block approach of how you're going to craft a solution for your organization. Azure does this better than we do in the office space, and we could potentially look to how they have implemented their solution stack in ways of giving customers those Lego building blocks to put solutions together rather than have a lot of competing services that we offer. So that's certainly a roadblock. I don't know how significant that is to most organizations, but it's there, and we need to be cognizant of it.
Great, thank you. Moving on to Mark.
Yeah, I thought I would start just by falling on the sword a little bit, just on behalf of Microsoft. I think one of the biggest areas for adoption is at just the rate of change. And to be frank, there are a lot of customers that ask us to go faster. There's a lot of customers to ask us to go slower. And of course, there's the balance, which comes through, I think, from a community perspective, awareness of what's going on, feedback of what is not just too much rate of change, but what are the right features, what are the right updates. And when it comes to adopting, especially if the question is focused around solutions, those might be solutions that we deliver. So new things like Microsoft Viva, or a couple of years ago when we moved Office 365 Video to Stream, or even something that was pretty significant, even if it was just a singular app, it really defined the direction we were going, something like Delve. There's always the question from individual customers. There's the macro scale of awareness, but as individuals at a company level, deciding, do we take this on as a project? And if we are, there are going to be some things that you have to put a lot of effort behind. And to my left and to my right, and probably out in front and all over the world, there are people that know that, from the front lines of, you don't just turn something on. And I know, again, falling on the sword, sometimes we just turn things on. A lot of that is an awareness campaign so that people know some of the new things that we're doing. But for solutions or just new technology to roll out with and without caution, sometimes it starts with making sure it's the right solution. So I would end on just echoing what Eric and Tracy were saying, that decide if this is a project you want to take on. Do you need to build versus buy? Buy sometimes these days as you already have it. So knowing the landscape, and when it comes to adoption and you say yes to something, go full on with it. Use it, to the heart of the license that you have and to the requirements of your business, and know that pushing it out means, there's some of that adoption work, which I think Tracy probably encapsulates the best. It takes a lot of work to raise awareness and to get a technology leveraged, not to the benefit of Microsoft, yay, big numbers. It's to the value of this technology helping to push business forward. But I know it starts with that rate of change, and we are always mindful of that. But hopefully we're doing it right in not being a stale, static product that maybe wouldn't have lasted 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those factors have certainly been highlighted over the last 12 months, particularly in things like education and also planning, logistical responses. How about you, Mike? Any thoughts on the challenges of adoption?
Oh, absolutely. I would say this. There are too many choices from too many cooks. I say that with love. When elaborate documents are needed to determine when to use Teams versus Yammer versus LinkedIn, or when to use OneDrive versus SharePoint document libraries, or any of a multitude of approaches to handling notes or tasks or calendars, that makes customers tear their hair out. I don't care if they're fans. It's still frustrating. They wind up ignoring innovation because of this, or they quickly jump from technology to technology and abandon perfectly good now legacy solutions, or they tried to do both and spread themselves too thin. Look, fostering innovation is a very good thing, and a certain degree of creative chaos for allowing Skunkworks efforts to come up with new and clever ideas. Look, I applaud this, but at a certain point, quicker than is happening now, pick a winner and evolve towards it. Because the only people who profit from this kind of chaos are consultants. So instead of constant replacement, how about constant enhancement and a constant migration path? If I could ask for anything that would help with adoption, because I like constant updates and constant growth. That's the cloud. That's the current times. I don't apologize for seeing a new notice from Microsoft 365 in my email box every time with a new critical and radical update, as long as it's a clear path forward from what I've already got.
Marvelous, thanks very much. Okay, so the next question is basically around the massive uptake in third-party development since the sort of relaunch of SharePoint, and in particular the SharePoint framework becoming available. How would you like to see this expand or improve? Not necessarily both things, but one or the other, or both. This time, let's start with Eric, please.
Well, obviously, recent issues highlighted that there are some quality concerns that need to be addressed there around the tooling stack and some consistency of releases. But I think more importantly, from a consistency perspective, is we need to get to a place where we have a consistent development methodology around how we invoke and work with the services. And that means everything needs to go through the graph or have a graph-like experience rather than the disjointed technologies we have now. If you can do some things in the graph and something in the REST APIs and some things in the CSOM APIs, and that needs to consolidate. And I know that work is underway, and it's hard, very hard to bring all that together. But as was mentioned earlier about the hard work being done years ago to make the smoother sailing these days, that hard work has to be done. We need to get to a point where we build, and I hate to bring up Azure again as a standard bearer here, but where we build solutions like we build for Azure. Well, right, but I keep sort of flogging the same horse. But nevertheless, when you go to work with extending Azure, you know you're working with the Azure Management APIs or particular endpoint APIs. There's only one way in and one way out. We need to get there with SharePoint. We're not there yet, and Teams and OneDrive, and that needs to improve. But there's a couple other things that need to get fixed as well. First-class support in the IDEs, right? Even Visual Studio Code doesn't have direct integration for SharePoint as well as it could, whereas it does for other things. And then finally, the biggest point of inflection that we have is the whole authorization flow mechanisms that we're using now are still very confusing. And when I talk to people about it, that's where their eyes glaze over, and trying to understand those pieces of components are hard for developers. The more we can do to abstract and make that simple for them, so there's one way in and one way out, would, I think, dramatically improve our development acceleration.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, how about Mark?
Yeah, I thought I would give a non-developer answer. I have never written a lick of code. I only pretend to when I grab things from the community or my friend like Vesa and pretend through their eyes to develop. But I certainly want to take this question a little bit through the lens of a specific technology, Microsoft lists, and historically, obviously, SharePoint lists. And the balance of where there are tons of opportunities for people to write code, go through the graph, to the direct list API or any API. I think there's value in enabling that deeper level of development. But the answer that I'm sort of most comfortable with is the level of development also paves a pathway to what people want to accomplish more as end users. So instead of requiring custom code, or instead of requiring things like JSON, you see the direction of the product in areas, not to remove development, because that's the most important thing for the platform, but to push it down towards the value of the end user to be able to make clickable choices that would have been written in code previously. And one example here is the direction we're going with lists with the forms customization or the colors and the formatting on the rows and the columns. And as pointed as that might be for the answer, I think it's indicative of my hope, and I think the direction that I know the team is going, is to do on behalf of everybody at scale what developers may have done, but the higher value for developers to focus on is certainly now different. And those little tweaky, I can check a box, I can make a color choice, I can, maybe even snag a little bit of JSON from Chris Kent's, repository in GitHub, and move the needle of what I'm trying to accomplish, being a non-developer, based on all of those patterns and practices that have paved the way from actual development. So I think there's a lot of room to grow in everybody's space. And on behalf of end users, I love it when I see more choices that I can click and choose without having to hire a developer, but also knowing when I have a huge requirement that there's a wonderful community and the capability in the product to then build a real nice custom solution.
Cool, thanks. How about yourself, Tracy?
You're going to get the shortest of it ever answer out of me, Spence. So I kind of believe that not everyone should ride or own fast motorcycles. Okay, now I do, but I also know enough about SharePoint framework to know that I shouldn't be talking about it. So with that, I'm going to gracefully hand back to you, Spence. I'm not even getting involved in this question. I don't want to talk about things that I don't know a lot about.
The perfect answer, an object lesson that all SharePoint-related consultants should remember. How about you, Mike?
Well, Mark, I could not agree with you more. I think what you're talking about is actual citizen development, at least the way it really should be described. Citizen development is not Power Apps and Power Automate. Citizen development is Microsoft Lists and Excel and things like that. Development for non-developers, not teaching non-developers how to develop. That's a choice. It's a good choice. But no, the thing that I would bring up is, you mentioned explicitly the SharePoint framework, and you didn't mean that literally or in exclusivity, but I will say that so much of the developer story tends to be focused on front-end development. And look, I care about that, but not on a personal level. I'm a back-end person. I care a lot about server-to-server and API-to-API crosstalk. I want to see the job get fit. Eric was absolutely right, as he often is. Let's get it down to one API that does everything.
Okay, so the final
because when I
question
write
for this particular
server-side
panel,
stuff or server-to-server
sort of
things,
following on from that,
I
we're kind of
wind up
switching
needing
gears
to use
from
a combination
development
of
to
graph
specifics.
and a fallback to
What
REST API
technologies
calls or
related to
CSON
SharePoint
calls
doesn't
even
have to be anything
sometimes
particularly
in
in
order to
the
get some stuff done.
Viva or
Get
Microsoft
me down to one
365 space, but somehow
API because
related will be the most
chasing
important for
interfaces
people perhaps looking
means
to
I'm not
expand their
nearly
skill
as
set over the
productive.
next few
Finish the
years.
job.
This time, let's start with Mark.
Yeah, I think this is always, you're going to get a different answer year over year, right? But there's going to be some of those longer term solution or offerings that will certainly either change name or change direction or grow in capability. I thought I'd list out two for developers, one for IT and one for end users. The first for developers, the biggest thing that is certainly always worth investment in learning, even if you're not even if you're not a developer, learning what's possible with the Microsoft Graph. There are so many teams that are pushing content into the graph. There are so many APIs and ways to improve user interfaces, personalize more relevant experience. And I am the marketing person, so I will sound like I'm marketing, but I honestly this week for my, write a blog each week. I wrote about the Microsoft Graph and the value to developers and end users. And it really is a ton there. There's a ton behind it, and the future is really bright for the graph. And I think we hear that from all roles and types, customers, partners, everywhere. Getting a little bit more pointed for developers, there's just getting comfortable with adaptive cards. They're showing up everywhere, and they really make it a great experience for end users to get something where they are, in a chat, on a page, in a custom user interface. And I don't know at all what it means to build an adaptive card, but from what I read, it looks to be relatively simple development with high value that delivers direct to the end user. And it's just a direction that Microsoft is going to be able to plumb in unique custom tasks or actions directly where people are. For IT, I think there's huge area to look into around templates. There are new custom list templates that we've just announced that we'll be bringing, site templates. You can templatize an entire Microsoft Teams team, you create it. And there's just huge value to IT to be able to strategize around getting the templates right so you can do things at scale within the realm of knowing what gets created when you create it. Always with the balance of self-service and the balance of being able to report and track down, what might have gone a little off the rails. But I think there's just huge value in templates, and I hope we get pushed a lot to streamline that, but also just to make that a common practice for IT. And last, and this is a quick one, for end users, there is the hidden secret of on hover. So we are all hovering right now with no legs on the floor, but when you're in Microsoft 365 Experience, just hover over something, hover over a file name, hover over a person's name. With Microsoft Viva Topics, hover over a topic, and then that amazing exposure of more information behind the topic card, the file card, the people card. So on hover to a much richer, deeper experience, so much more gets exposed.
Great. Moving on to Tracy.
Okay, so my focus, of course, is always going to be on the super user or non-developer, purely because of where my space is, of where I'm comfortable. But these citizen developers now obviously have the ability to do so much more. And I'm talking Microsoft 365. So with the tool set that they already have and the apps that they already use. So, and I know that you said technical skills or technology, but before I even get to that, and get to the technical skills, I always suggest to citizen developers, and with that I mean anyone who is a smart user on technology, people. Everyone's becoming citizen developers, by the way, or you should. Now, I do feel that they must also invest some time on sharpening up on soft skills, my stupidest word ever, that should be called power skills, but that's what I call it. Because I honestly don't think you can build great solutions if you don't have some insights into specific things. And I'm going to likely say change management and root cause analysis and problem solving, communication, documenting your solutions, and even a bit of project management, for example. Now, I don't expect anyone to go and get a degree in this or something. There's a website that I use, Mind Tools, which about 80 or 90% of the content's for free. But people can actually go through some of those articles and learn a couple of methodologies, because if you're in charge of building the app and kind of rolling it out, which happens on smaller levels, then you need to learn some of those skills, because it has an impact on how good those solutions are that you put to market or give to your department to use. So I think that's very important. For me, they're still skills. I mean, they're life skills. It's important. It's digital literacy skills. And then I think for the technical skills, for those who do use the Microsoft 365 platform, you absolutely won't make a mistake to invest extra time into learning more about using Microsoft Lists and using the Power Platform, which of course includes Power Automate, Power Apps, and Power BI. And I think something I just want to leave there is something that I always say to my students as well, is that if you're one of those people who's going to say to me that I'm not going to spend time to learn because my company doesn't pay me, well, I don't have time overtime to do this, then sweetie, you're going to get replaced by a robot, okay? Because I don't have attitude problems like that. You are the greatest investment you can ever invest in, and no one can ever take that away from you. So start taking 5 or 10 minutes a day. I mean, 5 minutes a day is 4 days a year, okay? Take a couple of minutes a day and invest in yourself. you have zero excuses because all the topics and learning content is out there. You have zero excuses. And a lot of us don't sit in traffic anymore on the way to work. So you know what? Zero excuses. Take 20 to 30 minutes a day and you will have you will not recognize yourself in a couple of months. So invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset after all.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just echo that from another perspective. If you compare this to learning a musical instrument, you know, if you play 5 minutes a day for every week, every day of the week, you'll learn much faster and you'll improve much faster than if you play for half an hour once a week. And that's the continual improvement is critical here. How about you, Mike? Yeah, absolutely. Again, with my analogy on the instruments, you know, there's the ability to technically play the instrument, and then there's the ability to hear music.
A lot of you guys are focusing on. Okay, you have to focus on.
Okay, so finally, for this question,
but you're missing the point. And maybe you implicitly know this and just aren't saying it aloud. But I'm going to be explicit about it.
The skills to.
It shouldn't be about the tools. Those change.
Okay, so to finish up this particular panel, Eric, any thoughts on the technologies that will be
on improving solution skills
for people looking to expand their skills?
Organizational behavior, which techniques actually foster people wanting to share information with each other and other people wanting to reuse it or think to do that first rather than reinvent the wheel every time? How do you approach business processes so that they improve outcomes and reduce throughput? I don't care about automating activity. I care about getting results, and you should too. How do you figure out which questions to ask of data and to make sure you're collecting it, and how to properly interpret results so that they make sense and that you can do good things based on that. Here's a quick analogy. Why should we be advocating that people get better and better at using Microsoft Word if we're not sure they know how to write in the first place? So, you know, if I'm a good writer and I see that Word will help me, I will be motivated to learn it and I will do it readily and happily. If I don't know how to write, knowing the tools and technology is not going to help me. In fact, it'll accelerate me being
lots of features for it in the platform, and more features are coming. And then finally, automation. You have to learn Power Automate and to a certain degree Power Apps, but automating your solutions and your business processes is key. And And from that perspective, with a nod towards the citizens developers, has learned how to build custom connectors, or at least how to describe
Why would I master Excel if I don't know how to prepare a budget?
enable your automation and business solutions. It's a critical part of the Power Platform. It's getting a lot of attention, as well it should. There's a great team that's working on it, and you will see a lot of movement in this space, and you'll be taking advantage of a lot of those in the future. So now is the time to get on board.
Marvelous. Thank you very much. So yeah, with that, we'll wrap up the first panel discussion. And if we could get a virtual round of applause for our panelists, please. Tracy, Mark, Eric, and Mike. Thank you very much.
Woo! Woo! Thank you, thank you.
Looks like a fish tank.
So Spence, obviously the music parts are not going to work. Allspace VR is showing us its limits with audio particularly. Can you hear me?
Yep.
It's like a virtual meeting. Can you hear me? Yep, we can hear you. So yes, I would just since we can not go with the audio parts and the fun parts, unfortunately, and we are very proud for what we have prepared. But obviously, audio is not working. Allspace VR with more people as it. So I would just suggest we continue with the second batch of telling stories, and then I see the names who are waiting here for us. I'm totally excited. I have seen a man with the red hoodie, blonde hair, quite skinny with a funny Finnish accent around. There he is, Vesku, my friend.
Hello, hello.
Come on stage.
All good with the
Ladies
audio?
and gentlemen, one and only, Vesa Juvonen.
Are you wearing shoes, Vesa?
Am I wearing what?
I know you don't have any legs here, but are you wearing shoes?
Shoes. Translate to finish.
Vesa, I think they want to know if, like you always do, are you not wearing shoes?
No. So I'm playing with the mute and unmute button, so I'm not wearing shoes. So of course not. So why would I? So can you hear me? Just double checking.
We can hear you, Vesku. Go on.
All good.
Okay, excellent. So the stories. So quickly, just kind of well, coming up with stories is always interesting and fun. But what I wanted to actually kind of a pinpoint is the historical situation with SharePoint, where we came from and where we are right now, which is actually one of the key, let's say, success points of the community. So I joined Microsoft back in 2006, I think it's October 2006. So I'm going to actually be 15 years in Microsoft in a few months, which is pretty unbelievable, because I never thought I would actually go through or be still in Microsoft after the 4 months of a trial period. So it's been pretty cool. Now, when we actually started in Microsoft at the time, SharePoint 2007 was about to come out, and it was actually a really interesting time, and comparing that situation, the current situation, when there was zero documentation available, especially for development of anything. So all of the extensibility, all of the development, all of the farm solution, nobody had no clue what is a farm solution. Of course, now it's documented, and there's documentation and guidance and videos and all of that available. But at the time, there wasn't really even proper YouTube. So there wasn't really a video guidance. There wasn't really a documentation, which would have been up to date. I think mainly because nobody understood how big SharePoint is going to grow. So, and one of the key success points for that growth, for no doubt, was actually the partner ecosystem. So the fact that you can extend, you can modify, you can do things in SharePoint based on the customer requirements. So you're not limited only on what is being provided out of the box, which is a super important piece. Understand, don't customize things which are provided out of the box. But still, that's no doubt one of the key success points. Now, what's interesting related on that time period, also comparing them nowadays, is that I think the lack of the documentation, lack of the guidance, lack of the centralized, let's say, information which Microsoft provided is one of the key reasons why the community was so strong, because we basically learned from each other. We came to be the best community in the internet or in the industry because of the fact that we rely on to each other to learn the things. So there was a lot of people who were blogging much more than nowadays. There was a lot of people who were sharing their learnings between each other, which is actually no doubt one of the reasons why the community grew to be so big. And also if you think about SharePoint Saturdays, nowadays there's a remote event every single day across the world, which is kind of awesome. But SharePoint Saturdays were the only thing which happened at the time in 2009, 2010, or whatever. So it was a quite different age and different time. And one of the things which is super exciting from my perspective, if you think about right now what we're saying, is that the learnings of that time and learnings of the community and the SharePoint community is growing across all of the other areas, which is a super important piece of this as well. This is not about one product versus one product. It's all about the Microsoft 365 and how what we can do together with Azure and all of the other services. So it's been really exciting to see within the past years where people are extending to new products, to Teams and Power Platform and everything else. And then we're copying the similar kind of, let's say, community mentality. We're creating the communities. We are sharing as much as possible between others, rather than keeping things to ourselves, considering things as your precious, which certainly is not the best way of doing that. So it's been really, really awesome to see how the learnings of the SharePoint community are also getting extended to other areas of Microsoft 365 in the best possible way. But we wanted to actually have these stories relatively fast, so I'm not going to take more time than this. I just want to say huge thank to everybody. I started as a consultant for 8 years in the field, building stuff together with customers and all of that, and then moved to the engineering side like 6 years ago. It's been a really wild ride. I'm one of the junior guys because it's only been 15 years working in SharePoint from that perspective, but it's been wonderful to know a lot of you people and also the new people. It's not about how long you've been around. It's really about the mentality of sharing because sharing is caring. But thank you everybody from my side, and great to see the interest and great to see the growth of the community also outside of SharePoint, because this is, let's teach how we can create the other products and other services or grow the community also those sides, not just on SharePoint. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Vesa. We'll get some more thoughts from Vesa on the community aspects a little bit later with our second panel. I just wanted to mention that we both met during the development and creation of the MCM experience, and that's an example of the community at a wider level in terms of just the type of people that you're going to meet and benefit from the mutual experience over time.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Vesa. We'll see you in a little bit.
That's good. Thank you. I'm gonna stage dive as well.
Just continue on what Vesku said. In 2016, Vesa, please correct me. We had, I think it was 2016, we had a keynote in Munich, actually, or in Erding, very close to Munich, about the future and guidance on SharePoint development. And I hope that some of our discussions have then influenced no, it was 2015 actually, has influenced what has been done later done on SPFX. I remember, Vesku, when we were discussing, there was no proper guidance for developers back then, and later on came SPFX, came PNP and everything. And part of that keynote was Vesku, was myself, and the person who I'm very, very proud and happy to announce here now as the next speaker in our stories, Mark Henderson.
Well, hello. Can
Mark?
You hear me?
We can,
am I making noise?
But we still can't see you. You are making noise. Hi there, Mark.
Right here. I'm looking right at you.
Nice.
I've never lived in a cartoon before. This is a new experience for me. Wanted to look like SpongeBob SquarePants, but apparently that wasn't possible. So, SharePoint stories. We all have so many of these stories, but Addis wanted me to talk about one thing, and I'm gonna jump to that in a minute, but I think my first touch of what became SharePoint was back in 1999, where I was working at one of the big 5 accounting firms, and we went out to Microsoft to talk to a group of people out there about something that they were doing. I don't think it even had a name yet. And I definitely remember that Exchange was going to be the data store for this thing. And so I think it was probably the glimmer of what became Tahoe and then Team Services and all of the other stuff. I seem to remember that Tom Rizzo might have been in the room, but I'm not sure if that timing was right. Jeff, I don't know if you were there. I mean, it was so long ago, I can barely remember the trip itself, but it goes way back. So, you know, my life with SharePoint has been one that sort of intensified in probably the 2005, 2006 era. Started working with SharePoint really as a living, and it's been wonderful ever since. Around 2009, I had a client in the financial services industry that wanted to deploy a lot of solutions, but wouldn't let anyone touch any of the servers. I don't know if any of you were ever in that situation. And so I started sort of playing around with what I could get done with the SOAP web services, and started to sort of come up with some repeatable code and stuff. And all of that turned into what I published as SP Services. And SP Services was just one hell of a lot of fun for me to build. I was accomplishing things by calling those web services, and I was able to share what I was doing as an open source project, which I had never participated in before. So that the whole thing was new for me, and it really became all consuming in a sense. You know, it was just so fun that I was you know, saying goodnight to my family and then working from 10 to 1 in the morning on it because it was just that fun. And you know, I think it was a great experience because there was a lot of community feedback from it. There was a lot of community involvement. It was clear that I was helping people. I was getting emails from people at companies. You know, their email addresses were recognizable to me. So, you know, very large companies were using the stuff that I was producing, and that was just so satisfying. But I think one of the best things about that experience for me was that it gave me a feeling of place. It gave me a way to give back to a community that I was sort of new to in a sense, but that was giving me so much as well, you know, because about the same time I was starting to speak at SharePoint Saturdays, I was starting to be interested in being involved in the community and share what I knew, as little as it was at the time. I didn't realize how naive I was about development and the platform at the time. But it was sort of a launchpad for me as a person for, you know, being part of this community and being involved in it and having a topic to discuss with people in the community, and some thinking about how to build solutions that was a bit unorthodox, but I think accomplished a lot for a lot of people. I still run into SP Services calls in classic SharePoint pages and SharePoint Online these days. So I know that a lot of people have benefited from that stuff. So, you know, I guess the moral of that story is the community is just such a fantastic one. We'll be talking about that more on the panel questions, but if there's a way for you to give back, if there's a way for you to participate, and it can be very tiny things, it can be very big things. Everything in this community is a team effort. We're all in this together. We all benefit from each other's knowledge and sharing. And I think it's just the most splendid environment and community to work in that there probably is on the planet. So it's been a great journey for me, and I look forward to, you know, I said something on LinkedIn the other day. You know, I expect to be doing SharePoint work for the rest of my mortal life. You know, I see no reason to try and do something else, because this whole platform continues to evolve, continues to provide more capabilities and interest and value to organizations. It doesn't matter to me whether SharePoint is called SharePoint or whether it's buried inside something inside, you know, Viva or some other branding name. It doesn't really make any difference because the concepts that we're using to solve problems are fundamental to a successful organization.
Look, here's looking forward to another 20 years.
And I'm done. Addis, where'd you go?
Thank you very much, Rob. Addis is to your right, hiding.
I see you, though. That's the cool thing.
Yeah, so again,
go stand down in Finland with Vesa.
And next up, I'd like to introduce somebody you're probably all familiar with as well, Steve Walker. If you could join us on stage, please, mate. Steve and I also met in a darkened room for 3 weeks in Redmond. Take it away, Steve. I think you might be on mute, Steve. Hi, Steve. I think you may need to turn your megaphone on. Oh, there we go. I can hear something now.
Steve? So right, whenever somebody of you complains about team meetings in the future, please remember this.
Steve Walker, are you able to hear? If you are, we are unable to hear you.
Perhaps if you can, move around if you can hear us. Yeah, okay.
Steve is cheerful moving around, but not talking.
Let's whilst we try and sort out Steve's audio issues, how about we move on to Eric Shops?
Yeah, get him off the stage. Get somebody who can talk.
I'm not sure I'm your best choice for that, boys, but give it a go.
an adequate replacement, Eric.
I will encourage Steve when he gets his audio working to please tell the chicken dance story. I thought that I would just share a few anecdotes with you of things that I've seen over the years, just funny things that have happened or interesting circumstances. And the first one is something that I call the scavenger hunt story, which was way back in the 2007 days. I was called in to build a brand new intranet for a company that the 2003 rollout was not, let's say, very well received. And so they wanted something big and splashy that, and some of you are going to remember this statement, didn't look like SharePoint. And of course, it was a huge customization and branding exercise, which meant that we spent weeks and months moving pixels around and changing things. Interestingly enough, the designer who put together the comps, when he walked into the room in the first meeting, said, please don't Frankenstein this and chop this up. And of course, that's exactly what they did. But the idea to drive adoption behind this heavily customized solution was to have a scavenger hunt where they embedded image web parts on various pages throughout the portal, and they socialized it for weeks beforehand, and of course users on the day of fired up 20 different browser instances to do this scavenger hunt to win prizes, and it crashed not only SharePoint, but it crashed their entire network, which means their VoIP phones went offline, and it was a complete and utter disaster. So, moral of that story is that's a bad adoption strategy. Certainly don't encourage people to do that. I'll tell you another quick one, which is a customer we went into to migrate from 07 to 2013. And of course, doing that in those days meant you ran the pre-upgrade checker and whatnot to make sure that their data was capable to be moved. And we discovered in the process that they were using way more data than they should have had for the number of site collections. And additional investigation narrowed it down to one file in one library that was using hundreds of gigs. of storage, which obviously makes absolutely no sense how that could happen. And further investigation determined that they were using a single spreadsheet, it was about 20 megs in size, to track risk factors for all their insurance adjusters. And they updated this file somewhere between 20 and 30 times a day, so hundreds of times in a week. And what do you think they had enabled? Well, of course, they had versions enabled in that document library that they had never set the limit on. So there were hundreds of gigs of versions of one single file that were blocking their upgrade for the entire organization. And there was no easy way to undo that. That was a fun adventure to overcome. And finally, I'll tell you a last quick little story, and that is what I like to call the deadly apostrophe, which was a huge production farm, dozens of servers, migrating from 2013 to 2016. We had spent months, almost a year, working on this process, and everything had gone pretty much according to plan until deployment of one of their dozen web applications that unfortunately was customer facing for all of their customers and partners, that wouldn't deploy and kept erroring out. And after 30 some odd hours straight marathon trying to get this portal deployed, this one thing was blocking us. And it all came down to a web config for their external facing web application, and a single apostrophe that was cut and pasted from a Unix system, so it brought over the wrong ASCII code. So you had a squiggly apostrophe. That one single apostrophe blocked a year-long project for the better part of 3 days from getting deployed, and led to all sorts of chaos in the management team and obviously with the SharePoint team. But we were finally able to overcome it once we figured out that it was nothing more than a cut and paste error. So those just a few quick stories. We all have lots and lots of crazy adventures like that we've gone through over the years. But I'm going to echo what Mark said and say I look forward to the next 20 years of stories that we can all get together and tell on adventures that we have in.
Great stuff. Thanks, Eric. We did actually consider a segment called SharePoint Disasters, but we thought we would keep it more positive than that for today. Maybe we'll do that, revisit that in a future event for comedy value. Steve, are you back with us?
What do you mean by SharePoint disaster? What do you mean by SharePoint disaster, Spence?
Well, you know, the horrendous deployments, comedy customer requirements, these kind of things.
Oh, that's called Tuesday over here.
Yeah, the stuff that never happens.
Yeah. Steve with us, brother.
Hello, Steve. Are you still with us? Okay. I guess Steve is still having problems with the microphone or similar. In which case, we will move on to Mike Fitzmaurice.
Right, and we'll ask Mike to talk as long as Fitz, as Steve doesn't appear.
Yeah. Welcome back, Mike.
There we go. Am I in full-blown megaphone mode now? All right. I thought I would tell you a very, very early story. The community as we know it really started to kick off or come into its own late in the early aughts. There were smatterings of it in other places. But a lot of people don't remember when the center of gravity was solidly centralized in Redmond, and there were community people that acted as satellites, but again, it was at one point a corporate-driven thing. We were speaking from Redmond, but not with one unified voice. Because I remember the history of SharePoint. I was involved with SharePoint since back when it was a skunkworks effort called PKM. And Mark Anderson, Tom Rizzo was involved in that really early on. Up through just before 2010. Those years were very different from these years. people don't remember how, or most people don't remember, Jeff clearly does, how much the early days were a struggle, both inside and outside Microsoft. The outside effort is easy. We were trying to get .NET developers to take SharePoint seriously, and IT pros as well. But most developers thought, in fact, IT pros as well, thought we were something cute developed by the Office team because they didn't associate Office with servers. Exchange had only just become absorbed into the Office infrastructure. Now, we were successful. A lot of people told their friends. This community is kind of a direct result of that effort, but it just took time. But there were struggles early on in Microsoft between Team Services, which came out of the Front Page group, and Portal Server, which came out of Exchange. Each of them thought they were the real SharePoint. Jeff Teper's the father of SharePoint, no two ways about it. But he's the adopted father of SharePoint Foundation. He's the birth father of SharePoint Portal Server. And these things mattered early on because who owned SharePoint and what SharePoint was and what it meant was constantly being fought over. The SharePoint team was a nice organic set of groups that came up with very clever technology and were largely ignored by our Office masters until Office started to notice us and then wanted to wrest a lot of control away, especially with branding. So they would seriously make us say, and never ever abbreviate, Microsoft Office SharePoint Portal Server or Microsoft Windows SharePoint Services. And if you absolutely needed to refer to the whole thing, you couldn't call it SharePoint, you had to call it Microsoft SharePoint Products and Technologies. Seriously, I was never allowed to say SharePoint by itself until 2010. SharePoint was caught in the middle of a battle between Windows Server and the Office Server group. Everything involved politics and lawyers and branding people. In developer land, there were struggles between those of us that knew that servers would drive the Office division's developer story, and a lot of holdouts that still believed the center of gravity was around smart client extensions to desktop applications. I had one of the very few early corporate blogs because back then, Office was afraid to reveal its plans before release. There were patent issues, there was fear of people getting annoyed if things changed at the last minute. Essentially, engineers were being ordered at the time not to blog at all at the risk of being fired because it was considered to be something that would get in the way of shipping. It could not be more different from the culture at the time in the server and tools division, which was setting the standard. And it could not be more different from the way things are now. But there was a time when creating this community, in a participatory community and a decentralized community, was not a given. It took a decade before everyone caved, admitted that it was just all called SharePoint, that it belonged to Office, and that an Office server technology mattered, and that staying in lockstep with what the server and tools guys were doing would be critical. Not being different mattered. And it wasn't enough to ship software. You had to include the community in the development lifecycle. The crazy thing is, we won despite all of these issues. And in fact, I would argue that we won because of these issues, because SharePoint was never perfect. Being pulled in so many directions ensured that it would never be perfect. But it also meant that everybody thought it was theirs. And that sense of ownership and involvement, I think, mattered a lot. It also meant that if Redmond was going to be reluctant to speak too loudly and too often, the community would fill that gap. And it totally did. So SharePoint turned out to be incredibly resilient because of its imperfections. It gets carved up and reassembled, and it still keeps going strong. It gets reshaped and reclaimed, but it's still here, and it's still evolving. And happy 20th birthday, and here's to 20 more years. Thanks, dude.
Marvelous. Thanks, Mike. Thanks very much. So we'll now try one more time, see if we can get Steve to join us on stage.
Hey, Steve.
Hello, Steve. Can you hear us? Oh, no. That's the answer to that. Okay, in which case we won't try and fight the issues with the audio any longer, and we'll move on to the next panel. This one is on the SharePoint community in general, and so for this panel we'd like to welcome onto stage Vesa again, Mark Anderson again, and John White. Marvelous, that was very quick. Okay, just give me a second, fellas. So again, same kind of format as the previous panel. We have a few questions, 4 questions related to the SharePoint community, and just be interested in your thoughts. As we've heard a few times today already, you know, the SharePoint community is often referred to as the best community in technology. And we've heard some of the stories that kind of enunciate why we feel that way. But perhaps we could get your views on what makes it so special and unique. Particularly, you know, we've picked the panelists deliberately because of their experience in other technologies and in other communities. So let's start with Mark. What do you think makes the SharePoint community special and or unique?
Experience with other communities. You mean I'm old, so I was around when we were still using stone tablets? Is that?
That's what he's saying.
Takes one to
That is
know
what he's
one.
saying. I'm only a little bit older than you, John White. All right. So, yeah, you know, I think Mike actually hit on something interesting when he was talking. You know, in a sense, this community has succeeded in spite of Microsoft. In the early days, Microsoft folks really weren't allowed to talk to the community. That's changed totally. It's 100%, 180 degrees in the other direction now. But I think what happened around the time of, especially when SharePoint 2007 came out, there was sort of this, you know, wonderful convergence, this magical moment of people who were self-selected because they were working with a platform that enabled collaboration. So we were all sort of pre-wired as people to want to collaborate with not just the people in our organizations, but just in general, people who did similar things to us. And at the same time, I think the internet was starting to support the kinds of activities that we wanted to have across the globe to be able to build the community. So I really think it was just sort of a lucky accident of history, and also the fact that the product focused us on the kinds of activity that makes this community what it is. I often wonder, you know, if I were not part of the sort of the Microsoft stack community, if I worked, you know, in the Oracle community or the, you know, are there other communities? There must be a couple. What they would feel like, you know, do they have this same sense of purpose? Because I've been so enmeshed in this one for so long, I actually don't know the answer to that question. It would be interesting to hear for people who are newer to this community how it holds up against other ones. But I think really what's made it special and unique is that no matter how this platform has evolved, you know, it started out as a community around SharePoint. SharePoint's still there, but you know, it's not just SharePoint anymore. I think we SharePointalists have adopted every new app and service that's come along on top of Microsoft 365 and tried to turn it into the same successful community that we've had with SharePoint. I think we see a lot of people coming from the Yammer community who came with the same kind of mindset. We have our interesting discussions about why the two communities are different and why they're the same. I think that it's just an additive effect over time, and it's been a lot of fun seeing the community just expand and expand and expand, and and hold on to that flame that's been there for so long and has really somebody muted me, so I guess you thought I was done.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a. If we could set time limits, that actually would be fun, but it does sort of do it itself from time to time, unfortunately. Thanks, Mark. Let's move to the same question basically to Vesa.
Yeah. So during my storyline, I think the kind of touched this slightly already, and the whole point being on the fact that since we were such a successful product back in already in 2010 or 2007 forward, I think that really established that connection, and then we've been kind of keeping those connections and help and maybe lack of the documentation and guidance wasn't there, and that has been really kind of growing that connection between people. And then as we're moving to the cloud, which has been highly successful as well, those connections still remain. And a lot of the people I hang with still, like Spence is a good example. Like I said, we met in MCM training, which we created back in 2008. So these connections still remain, even though people go to a different products or they do different things, and they still kind of identify quite often themselves as a SharePoint, let's say, grown-up or coming from a SharePoint side, even though nowadays they might represent something else. And I think, and that's one of the things. Maybe it's I don't know what identifies us as the best community in the world. I really think it's the people and the willingness, being highly inclusive. Everybody is always welcome. You don't have to be in the SharePoint for 20 years. Every single person, a new person, is always welcome on everything what we do. And nowadays there's so many options to be available to get engaged as well, from a community calls, from the remote meetups and all of that stuff.
Can anyone hear me?
Now we have Steve.
Hey, Steve, we can hear you now, and we're just finishing up on stage.
I just have to interrupt Vesa one more time.
If we could have the same question to John, please. And I think John is now on mute, probably accidentally.
They must have gave me John's voice.
There we go. Now we can hear. Or not, as the case may be. Can you check your microphone, John?
There's a limit of people who can have audio in this call. So
yeah.
Now that Steve has audio, there you go.
Well, you know, Vesa and I could just keep talking for hours if that would be.
Well, yes,
Did I miss a cue there?
There we go, John.
Oh, there we go.
Now you're on.
Really good.
I couldn't hear you at all, Spence. I don't know why, but it doesn't matter. Why are we special? Why are we unique? We're certainly fun. I mean, have a look at the slides at the back of the room, and you see how much fun that's been had over the years. Why that is, I'm not 100% sure. I think, as Mark said, there's something to the fact that it's a collaborative space. As Mike said, we're coming together to help each other out. Are we unique? I'm not sure we are. I think we are right now. If I think back to earlier in my career, I was involved with Lotus Notes. Spence had that up on the slides earlier, right at the beginning of this celebration, and Notes was very much the same sort of community. And I think that's almost proof of Mike's point, because it's the same, or even in Mark's, it's the same type of platform. It was a collaborative platform that was, dare I say, ill-defined. It you couldn't really tell someone what it did because it was up to you to do it. So this community came together to share early days. I mean, we're talking about pre-internet, to share what they did with it or how they were able to get success with it. And there's something about that sharing of ideas and this closeness. And I can certainly say this community, I'll go back to being special. This community, I've formed friendships in this community that I'll count among my most important friendships in my life, and it certainly helped over the last year to have contact with these folks. So, I don't know that I can definitely answer why, but I can certainly say that it is.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo that particular point, John. I mean, one of the major differences I noticed was because of the nature of the product. It brought a very kind of different type of person into IT in general, perhaps much more varied and wide than things that were traditionally very technical. Things like Exchange Server or SQL Server, for example. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Just to follow that up, one point I did want to make is, and today I straddle the Power Platform, particularly the business intelligence community. And those guys, I don't know how many times they've mentioned to me, I want to come and hang with you guys. You guys are way more fun. So, I mean, there you have it. That's just proof of it.
Yeah, we all, the sort of older ones of us all will refer to a funny story at the first MVP summit where there was a SharePoint gathering. And we were all hanging out, funnily enough, in a hotel bar somewhere in downtown Seattle. And a couple of chaps came and were in that hotel, and they walked over to us, and they could tell obviously we were Microsoft related, and they asked us what our product was, and we said SharePoint, and they said, amusingly enough, MapPoint. And but they asked to join us because they couldn't find the rest of their buddies, and so they spent the rest of the evening with us. Anyway, I believe Addis, have we got a message from Steve, or Steve himself, maybe?
Yeah, let's try to get Steve again on the stage. If not, I'm going to convey his message from which we chatted obviously a few seconds ago because I couldn't talk to Steve. Hey, Steve, can you talk now? Can we hear you now?
Can you hear me?
Loud and with echo, but that's you. That's you, Steve.
All right. Well, hey, sorry to just come up here and interrupt a panel discussion, but I think you guys are quite used to that, knowing me, the ones that do. I think I talked to Spence at an MCM rotation and spent quite a lot of time with him and Veza discussing passionately many deep development topics. SharePoint's just been amazing, and I think the one thing I said to Addis was SharePoint isn't just about the community, it is community. I mean, this thing has just been a bunch of parts and pieces all along, all jammed together. As a platform, I went out in 2007 when I saw this beta and said, hey man, we could really take this platform and build some really cool stuff on it. And I went and commenced building things for some of the largest customers on the planet. And then got pulled into the engineering team. And in the words of the great Jim Stearns, he said, Steve, you twisted and bent that thing in ways we never even imagined. And so then I got to spend the next, couple of years actually seeing it from the other side and working on the engineering side and understanding the concerns that they had. And taking all those large escalations from those big customers for those custom solutions we had built, and seeing how horribly awry those things could go, and how we need to back out of that basically. And then other folks told me, hey, we're going to just have to make sure that their user code never runs in our worker process, and so the whole API surface stuff, patterns and practices. I think the biggest thing that I knew was, bringing this community along on this journey is going to be the most important thing we do. And I will say kudos to Jeff Teper and Mark Cashman and those guys when we were sitting in the beta days of launching Office 365 and watching folks trying to jam some of those solutions in. It was quite interesting. So Watching that engineering team learn and grow through those years and become what they've become today. I've actually taken those experiences, and now I'm out working with some of our largest Azure customers, but it's really just the same community, that same spirit and that same approach to do those projects today. So happy to have a few minutes to chat with you guys, and really just wanted to say happy birthday to the community that really kickstarted my career in technology. So that's all.
Thanks, Steve.
Marvelous. Thanks very much, Steve. Thanks for joining us. Okie doke. So let's move on to the second question of this panel. This time starting, if we can, with Vesa. Perhaps a loaded question in some respects. How has the SharePoint community helped you the most, either personally or within your work?
Well, in my case, it gave me my work, and it gave me my job, and it gave me everything. So from that perspective, it has helped me a lot. So, but I think coming back on the early stage, and the community was really the way how we identified together with community, what the product can do. And like Steve was saying, even in engineering, and that's actually happens still. Now that I'm in engineering, you see that more and more, that people are like, hey, wait a minute, we never knew that you can do those kind of things. So that's not intended to be used like that, but then you see more and more people using things in different ways. But I think the community was really the fundamental piece, of course, on the success of the whole product, but then also on helping everybody else to learn and do and identify and know what can be done with the product by sharing their learnings. And nowadays we're obviously copying the sharing is caring and sharing the learning mentality in a lot of our guidance, a lot of the videos and the community effort. What we're doing, we're trying to kind of amplify the similar kind of thinking in our work nowadays, which didn't happen in the past. It was never really Microsoft driven, and it's still not Microsoft driven. We rather see ourselves as a coordinators and facilitators, and then let the community lead the way. But community gave me my job, and I'm super grateful for that. Mark,
wonderful. Thank you.
Throwing it to you.
To Mark.
Okay. Yeah, I think, for me, the community is one of the biggest reasons why I've been able to do what I do. I never believed in networking. I never believed in being an extrovert. I never believed in working with other people. I was very much a loner. And this community has pulled me out of that. It's made me want to contribute. It's made me a speaker. It's made me a P&P team member. It's made me a code contributor. All of these things that I would never ever have imagined that I would do. So, I as an MVP, I have connections into one of the best professional networks there is probably in the world. I mean, these people are way, way smarter than I am. So I get to reach out to people who I've gotten to know at, whether it's a SharePoint Saturday or an MVP Summit or even just a Twitter exchange. I mean, I've done fantastic transactions on Twitter and intellectual transactions. So all of this is just, to me, it's the rising tide floats all boats. I think we're part of a community that is very willing to help and raise everyone else up. I think that there's this understanding that if we help each other and help Microsoft in its development of a better product, everybody in the community wins. And there are a lot of different ways to win. There's maybe you make more money at your job, but there's also just a satisfaction. There's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of for me, self-worth that comes from being a member of this community that honestly has made me a better person. I can get all gushy and cry about this, and I mean that. Luckily, I'm a cartoon, so you can't see me do it. But I think it's really helped me turn into the person who I should have been all along, and that I can't overstate the importance of that, and I can't thank all of you as fellow members of this community enough for helping me in my journey to get to where I am at this point and where I hope to go. And I don't know where that is. I'm sure it will be awesome, and SharePoint will be there.
Great. Yeah, I think I would also echo that from a personal experience at SharePoint conference one year, where I gave a session about a boring topic, or I thought was a boring topic, and the first questioner after the session actually asked the room, which was very scarily full, for a round of applause for something that I had done, a couple of years earlier, which was a very strange experience, because I was obviously not expecting it. It's not why you do things, but it certainly makes you think about the potential impact you can have, and how careful you need to be with that impact. How about you, John? How do you feel the SharePoint community has helped you most? I mean, I think you mentioned the main thing earlier, but any other comments?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's going to be hard to follow Mark because he took my answer pretty much. But
that was my whole point, really.
Yeah, I thought so.
I was just trying to screw you up.
Thanks so much again. No, honestly, I mean, as you speak about not really being extroverted. Believe it or not, I'm not either. And I spoke earlier about I'm terrified of public speaking. I would freeze up. I'm fine one-on-one with people, but this community is extremely encouraging. And as I do it, they give you positive feedback where you need it, and negative feedback where that's necessary as well. And it gets your confidence up, and you begin to realize that you've learned something. If you know something, you should share it. By the way, if you know it, that doesn't mean anybody else can know it too, or it doesn't mean anybody else will know it. That's the imposter syndrome. And I think most of us in the room suffer from it. I certainly do. Nobody's going to want to know this. It's easy. I just figured it out. And so from a personal standpoint, I got past it. Can you tell? But I definitely got past it. But from a professional standpoint, how did the community help you out? I think I know what you were referring to. Was that your blog post on configuring the user profile manager?
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
Who here in this room has read Spence's post? I know most of us can't put our hands up. Who here hasn't read it? I mean, quite frankly, it's that was I learned from that. I was able to better what I was doing as a result of seeing that. And there are a million other posts, not quite as widely read as I think that one, but there are a ton of examples of that. And that got me to thinking, if I've figured something out, maybe I should share that with the community. At the beginning, I was blogging just so I had a place to put down things I found out so I could refer to them later. But over time, you get a little more confident at doing this, and you realize you do have something to contribute. And the other side of that, by the way, is you will learn from what you put out there. This community is very good at feeding back. Remember something I did a couple of years ago, it was early on in Teams, and I published a post about provisioning Teams couldn't do something, or I can't remember what it was even. But I think it was Martina Grom reached out to me and said, yeah, you can. Here's how. It was like, wow. So I published a post the next day talking about how to do that. I learned from that. I get that feedback. So it's helped me, not make a complete ass of myself, become, just better overall, like Mark says. So yeah, thanks so much for this community. I'll always want to be a part of it. And again, I do most of my stuff today over in the Power BI side of the house, but I still feel this community's home.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I mean, certainly if we go back sort of 10 years or so, blogging was certainly the thing to be doing. The avenue to get information out, as it were. Obviously, these days we now have many more options, perhaps some of them better. But starting with you for this question, John, I mean, following on from that, we've spent a lot of time talking about sort of our experiences over the years and so on, but let's change gears and think from the perspective of somebody who's just now coming in or getting started with this and wants to be part of the community, particularly at present where we don't have any in-person events, or at least they're extremely rare. You know, how can people get started and get involved? Any tips and tricks or resources that you think would be a good starting point for people new to the community?
I don't specifically have resources in mind. I think the resources change quite frequently. What I would say is just do it. Don't be afraid of it. If you've got something to share, as I was saying earlier, just share it. Share it in whatever medium you want to do. If you're comfortable with video, use video. If you're comfortable with blogging, use blog. I hate video myself, but hey, that's me. It doesn't matter how you get that information out. You will start to recognize names. Remember those names. Reach out to those names. If you've got questions of people, talk to them. Those are your resources. You establish a relationship that will introduce you to other relationships down the road. I've got a perfect example of a fellow named Norm Young, and he's became an MVP. I believe it was in June. It was early 2020, very early 20. It was February 2020. And so he's been an MVP who never got to go to Summit. I feel bad for him on that front. But he was working with one of our customers. And basically he asked me the same question. How do you get into this? And I told him, go at the time, go to the events near you. Now you can't do that, obviously, right at the moment. But there are a lot of virtual events you can join. In fact, there's probably a lot more opportunity from that standpoint if you're comfortable with the platform. And he just started doing that and writing and getting into the forums, the tech community for Microsoft, started answering any questions that he could. Eventually, he got awarded an MVP. We wound up, by the way, hiring him last year, and he's a fantastic resource. But he has driven forward and become one of the more active names in the Microsoft 365 community. So, just a personal example of helping. I was mentoring him in that case, but he reached out to me to ask and kept asking me questions along the way. So that's what I'd advise. Make personal contacts.
Cool, thanks, Sean. Okay, over to Mark.
Oh, I've been muted again. Oh, I'm here. You know, I think this community is very welcoming. It will greet you with open arms. I think the other thing to remember though is having a little humility as you enter is a good thing. You know, don't come in to be an expert. Come in to be who you are, and maybe that person is one asking a lot of questions, or somebody who's coming from a very low knowledge level because you've shifted your career or something. Come in and understand that everyone's willing to help you, but community is a labor of love, and most of the people in it are doing the work that they're doing on their own time. So respect that. Saying I need you to solve this problem for me right now is not a great entry. So that's just, maybe that's a little bit of a warning, but I think it's an important thing to understand that we're all in this together, but we have to treat each other with respect, inclusion, all of the, and I don't say this to be putting it off, but all of that important stuff that is such a big topic these days, that all matters. It matters a lot. So I think that's something to bear in mind. The other thought is that every entry point can be big or small. As an example, we've got the PNP effort that I'm a part of, the community docs. I have a couple of I don't have a couple of people. A couple of people have offered some very small changes. Literally spelling mistakes. A guy named Calvin Crawley has been going through the articles. Callum Crawley. I knew I was going to screw that up. And he's just been making some small changes, but it actually makes a difference. You know, it makes the articles read better. So you can start from something like that to, you know, coming up with a whole set of code that you might share. There's no sort of big and small in this. There's trying to give back because you're getting something from the community, and each person should find that unique way that can work for them. You know, not everybody is going to decide that they want to be a speaker at SharePoint Saturdays, though that's an excellent entry point. You know, in fact, when we do SharePoint Saturday in New England, which we're hoping to rev up again this fall, we try really hard to get first-time speakers on that agenda. So there are entry points that you know, those of us who've been in the community longer will try and help you into, but you know, not every entry point is the right one for you as an individual. Try and find somebody who can be a mentor to you. You know, I'm always happy to answer questions for people who are new to the community who want to try to get, you know, be more participatory. And I know that John and Vesa are of the same mind, and probably most of the rest of the people in this room. If it's actually a room, it looks like a giant cartoon to me. So you know, find your way and understand that this is a community that you can be a part of, even if you're somebody who just wants to be a lurker, someone standing in the corner, that introvert that I used to be. You know, you can still be a member of this community by following people on Twitter and watching what people post on LinkedIn and reading blog posts and all that sort of stuff. You'll get benefit from it, but I think you'll gain so much more if you can find some ways to you know, give back a little bit of yourself as well.
Great, thanks, Mark. Any tips from you, Vesa?
Yeah, so I have to say that it's kind of interesting that we have three persons in the stage suffering from imposter syndrome, but this doesn't feel that bad actually. So and being an introvert doing these things is always hard. But this is slightly different. But how to get involved in the community? One of there's multiple options, and obviously reaching out and starting discussion with people, like mentioned already, is super important. We also actually have a really great engagement model which is run by David Warner, April Dunham, Louis Fries, and Hugo Bernier, which is the Sharing is Caring initiative. And that really comes back on the fact that we help people to, first of all, to get started on using tooling or getting started on presenting. There's a buddy system, kind of a buddy partner system. So if you don't feel comfortable enough of doing a live demo, for example, in our community calls, where we do welcome everybody to do demos, you can actually partner with a more experienced person. And we pretty recently just had a really awesome session with Debyani from India, and then she was partnered together with David because they agreed that David would actually join on helping on the presentation. But then those are the ways we want to help everybody who's interested on learning to present or doing presentations to have that option. And then learning to use the tools, learning to use the tooling, how to contribute, for example, in code or in the documentation. There's community efforts related on the community docs, like Mark mentioned, and then there's sessions where we explicitly show how you can contribute, how you start that process of contributing. So we want to make sure that anybody who's willing or interested, there's always help available. And if you're interested on actually doing any of the demos, for example, in our community calls as an example, which is a great way of then, or even eventually getting MVP status, just reach out and we'll get you a spot and we'll move forward from there. It's just simple as that. It's always about asking and being, well, going over the edge and asking help, so to say. So here to help, absolutely.
I'd certainly echo that last point with respect to the MVP program and how it's, you know, grown and fostered the community over the years, and you know how much easier it is now to get inside, as it were, not necessarily to gain the award, but to, you know, start down the path towards it. And you know, it's a very welcoming group of people, and there's an awful lot of resources provided by the MVP program for the wider community as well. Also for people who sort of maybe move away or change their focus. You know, they're still part of things. It's not like the door is shut at that stage. Okay, so for the last question of this panel, and I'm going to tempt fate by just asking, hopefully, for some quite brief answers for the last one in the interests of time. How would you like to see the community evolve or improve, you know, over the next couple of years? And this time, let's start with Mark, please.
I think my number one hope, and I think it's already happening, is that you know, the community becomes more and more inclusive and fair and welcoming, which is almost hard to believe because I think it's actually been all of those things for a very long time. But you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 old white guys standing on the stage. So that in itself isn't a bad thing. I mean, we've all been doing this for a long time, but what that says is it's a little bit of an old white guy world in technology. And I think we're seeing that change. Huh? Who's not that old? Oh, Vessa's not that old. Well, he's hanging out with us, so it makes him feel older. So I think that, you know, the technology world has been a little too male dominated. I think it's been a little bit demeaning in some ways to people who are not old white males, and I've never liked that. It's not something that I think should ever happen. I think that you know, this community will continue to get better about being inclusive. It will continue to be better about treating everyone with respect. I think we've had a few hiccups over the years with that, and things have gotten swatted down pretty quickly. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you know, I really hope that this community stays as powerful as it is, regardless what the technologies do. You know, Microsoft can't stop us from doing this part. This part is ours. You know, having this community be strong is not about Microsoft shipping the next great product. It's about us standing together as community to help each other and really improve the organizations that we work in, and, you know, like I said earlier, raise all boats. So I want to really hope that the community adapts to what the community wants to be. And oh, by the way, Microsoft happens to be rebranding and shipping new products. We're all here for each other, and I want that to continue.
Great, thank you. Over to Vesa.
Yeah, so just to elaborate on what Mark was saying, obviously every single person who wants to be part of the community or wants to come be part of this should be able to do that. This should be an equal thing, regardless of any external attribute what people has, and that respect. And it's good to say that we're having that high respect already, but we can always improve that. And again, getting more diversity on the sessions and diversity on the conferences and all of that is super important, because it gives a clear signal of us pushing to a certain direction and to the equal world, which is super valuable. Now, the one thing what I also want to call out, which I kind of touched in my story section, is that I really want to get away also from the thinking that no, we're SharePoint, those are teams, those are Power Platform people, and this kind of that there is every now and then you hear stories related on those kind of people and that community over there. No, we should consider ourselves as the larger community. A lot of us, especially community and customers and partners, they don't have any idea what is the internal community, internal organization in the Microsoft. So that should not matter for the community. Community is there regardless of what are the products which we are shipping, like Mark was saying. So not divide between products or categorize people based on their skill sets, rather build a community which is all welcoming and taking everybody into account. So even though it's a SharePoint 20 years celebration, but of course, SharePoint is being used in so many products as an example. So it's not about individual, it's not about the individual products themselves, it's really about us. Me as a human being who are identifying to be part of this community, regardless are you a Microsoft employee or an external person, from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And if we sort of compare it to life in general, and we look back to how we all were as people, you know, at 20, obviously we had much room for improvement, and this is no different in that respect. I'm pretty sure none of us would like to, maybe we'd want to go back and change a few things perhaps, but we've all grown, and hopefully the community will do likewise. Okay, so to finish off, John, any further thoughts on how we can improve?
Honestly, just to underscore, because my answers were taken again by the both of them, inclusiveness overall, whether it's who you are or what you know or what the product group is. I mean, we're seeing already this community has grown to become more than just, we call it the SharePoint community, but it's really now the Microsoft 365 community. I want to see it evolve to adopt further product groups. I'm still kind of frustrated by the fact that the Power BI team is over here, the Power BI community is over there, and you guys don't know them, and there's things to be known by grouping together. I think that's obviously a function of the organizational structure at Microsoft. That, if you ask me, could stand to have some changing from that standpoint. But the more we share, the more the more there is mutual benefit and personal benefit. So yeah, inclusiveness overall.
Marvelous. Thank you very much. So that concludes the SharePoint community panel. We could say thanks to Vesa, Mark, and John. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you everything. I was personally spent enjoying hearing what they are saying, and I definitely can echo everything what Vesku said, what Mark said, and what John said. But I would also like to point what John said on his story, that we should also give some credits to ourselves. While everything is true what we have been heard, that evening in Zagreb that John mentioned when we said, yeah, and 20 years ago those people were shooting with each other. That's also an important part of who we are and how far the people go through this community. So there are definitely two sides of everything. And as somebody who is here actively for 15 years, I can say that we have a long way to go, but we have also come a long way until now. And John is still on the stage, and he's going to remember this pretty much exactly 10 years ago when I first became MVP. A lot of you will know this feeling. You come first time to Redmond, you see all these people, you have no idea who they are, you recognize the names, it just feels overwhelming. For John Bay, who basically took me for the hand, he became MVP like 1 or 2 years before me, and basically introduced me to a few people around, and that helped me a great deal. And that's what this community is all about. Sometimes taking the new people on the hand and introducing to the community to who we are, to what we are doing, to what we are up to. And this is one part of the inclusiveness and helping hands in this community that I really learned to appreciate throughout, I'm scared to say, decades.
Awesome.
Okay, Spence. we need unfortunately without any funny parts and entertainment parts, we need to somehow start to closing this down. Unfortunately, I had much fun. Behind you on the stage is the Collab Summit 2021 announcement.
Indeed. So yeah, I mean, maybe kind of as you mentioned, a little bit unfortunate that we can't have our closing video and some of the other activities, but we did want to draw your attention to hopefully an event where we take on board some of the lessons that we've just been talking about briefly, to the new dates and indeed the new location for European Collaboration Summit. I hesitate to say 2021, but we very much hope that this event takes place 29th of November to 1st of December in Düsseldorf, Germany. Obviously, the last year we weren't able to hold the event in person, and we made do with a virtual event. But we're looking forward to bringing the full-scale event back to Germany in the autumn. It's a wonderful location, certainly a much better conference facility in many respects to the previous event, and we have a greater capability, but we hope to also have the same standard of speakers and content, and most importantly, fun and community at Europe's largest SharePoint and Office 365 related event. So we'd very much like to see all of you there, hopefully in person, late November, early December this year.
You know what I'm totally amazed by? The event is almost completely sold out for a year and a half now, as long as it's the pandemic lasts. But people are just sticking to the event and say, yep, we are going to show up whenever it finally takes place. And we are all hoping that this pandemic will stop soon and that we will all meet in person in November. There are a lot of parties that we need to catch up. There are a lot of hugs that we need to catch up. And there are a lot of good and nice words that we need to exchange and to say to each other once we finally stop being cartoon figures, as Mark just said, and start being us again.
Yeah, and another thing that I think is terribly important that we haven't directly touched on so far today, but one of the incredibly important elements of our community is the wonderful support that we get from the sponsors who enable us to put on these events, whether it be community small events like a SharePoint Saturday, whether it's a huge event like European Collaboration Summit, or indeed the official Microsoft events. Without those sponsors and the ISV ecosystem that is around us in the SharePoint and Office 365 world, we just wouldn't be able to do these things. So it's definitely, they're a key part of our community, and a huge sort of shout out and thanks to all of the sponsors and historical vendors in this space for the support over the years.
Right, with that, I'm going to unmute now everybody because we just want to stay a few more minutes with you, to hang with you, just to exchange few words. I have definitely seen few avatars which I would like to talk in person in the next minutes. And right, unmute everybody. And Alex is going to put some nice photos without music background. We had the music background, but we are going to take the music background away. Just to remind us to what the community, what SharePoint meant and means to all of us. And really, thank you everyone for being here. This was just great. Thanks to all our speakers. Thanks to Mark Cashman. Thanks to Jeff for the keynotes and everything. Thanks for this community.
Woo, woo.
Thanks, everyone.
And excellent kudos to Addis and Spencer. Amazing
Absolutely.
workspace, amazing day. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, people.
Everyone. Thank you. Thank you all.
Right, I think the photos are telling enough for themselves. You could actually enjoy all those photos in the back wall all the time, but we decided just to put them on the front panel now for the end. Some of those are from European Collaboration Summit, some are from MVP Summit, some are from the Branson, Missouri. Whoever managed to find it on the map, it's also a great party, our sister conference in America. And yeah, that's how we roll.
Also, don't forget, if you haven't done so already, to try and ace the quiz. And we also have some snowballs on the stage. I don't actually know how to throw the snowball, but there must be a button that does that.
Let me show you, Spence. Where are you?
I'm over on the right hand.
I see Vesa first, doesn't matter.
Yes,